Netanyahu said something that was very, very much overlooked and I think very disturbing last week. He had given a speech, and an Israeli reporter asked him a question about the American-Israeli war against Iran. And he corrected her, and he said, it's the American war against Iran. We are America's ally.
Oh, boy.
And I thought, oh, buddy, that's not what you were saying 2 weeks ago.
It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Sunday, April 5th, 2026. Thank you for joining me today on this Easter. Thank you for joining me. Planned to do something quite quick today, and it didn't work out that way. As you guys know well, it's just how it goes some of these days when you're trying to get information out, and like maybe just this topic. Maybe we'll just focus on that today. Oh, well, we got to talk about this. And oh, well, I got to make sure they see that. No, well, this is updated from last time. Next thing you know, we got a full show. So let's get into it today. Now, mostly what I'm going to be doing for today is, and likely because I think some people won't even be seeing it until tomorrow, I'm just going to try to give updates around largely the Iran conversation. But as you guys well know with our conversations, and probably because you're aware yourselves, this is something that interconnects with a lot of different topics. So today's focus is about largely Iran and like the updates on the negotiation discussions, updates on the Strait of Hormuz arguments, updates on the down fighter pilot and the discussions that we were correct about, that there were indeed hundreds of people deployed inside of Iran, despite the aggressive pushback about somehow not calling that boots on the ground because we're a cartoon today. But all this updated, my points are that there's other things I'll try to include that I think connect to other parts of the story that I do want you to see. But again, largely Iran, save for a couple small points. I want to start today with an update on something I just wanted you guys to see if you hadn't seen it, because I'm trying to keep people up to date and want really just to help motivate other people to get involved in, whether it's gardening or something else, some kind of an outlet that you can feel either creatively or just, something that you can get out there and be involved with. I would like it to be things that you can better yourself in your own life, your own experience, your own sustainability, your own health. But whatever it is for you out there, it's important to find that. So I've been trying to show people. I recently pointed to the garden, the lettuce we'd already planted. Last year, I was showing you all the things we were growing. I recently posted this here in regard to the chickens we just got. And I'm just, it's exciting for me too, because this is a lot of this, chickens in particular, is new for me. And it's like I've said when we first moved to the new location we're at and got some more land, it's trying to do our best one step at a time, because it's for most people, it's not just something you can do, is to try to put my money where my mouth is, try to lean into the things that, for example, Derek Bros is just a shining beacon of where I think we should be going. And so I'm, trying to bring it that direction. So I wanted you guys to see what we recently took a step into in the, I guess, livestock direction, because we've talked about ducks or different things as well, but it's always more time, more resources. And that's the difficult part. I also want to give a shout out to Crossing Creeks Farms, which is our local, it's always not too close to us, but it's in Tennessee, and they're just outstanding people. Just click the link and you'll see for yourself. They're real people. They care about what's going on around them, and they care about their community. I met them through Catherine Austin Fitz. She's a huge proponent of them, and she invited me there a long time ago. And since then, we've been, going there for food, going there for, just everything we can to try to work with the local groups. And we recently went and got some chickens from them. Now, these are chickens, they're high production, what they try to do. And so after so many years, they kind of slow down their laying. And so they sell them off, and they still lay for years to come. And so we got a couple of, 3 of those, in fact. And here's the image we just shared, heading them home. You can only see 2 of them in the picture inside the crate. And then here they are inside the do-it-yourself chicken coop that we put together with just basically sort of frame we got, and then wrapped it with some chicken wire, and said, that's what we got to do. You got to make it work. And I think it's pretty well done, actually. Now, I should have grabbed you the other picture that showed you the larger view. I'll give you guys one posted at some point. And we got our first egg today. Hooray. But really, like I said, I'm proud we're doing it, but I'd like to help motivate others to show you that it's, whether you have a full schedule, and realize this is not something that I'm like shucking off on other people. This is me and my family. That's it. And so it's work that I try to do outside of all the other things we do. And like anybody else, we have jobs and obligations and family. It's just about whether you want to find the time. It matters. So again, thank you for tuning in today, guys. I want to also shout out a recent discussion I had. This is the actual second time we've been on with BetBeat Media. I wasn't familiar with them until Vanessa introduced me, and I think just it's a great. I've very much enjoyed the intellectual conversation, the insightful discussion, and just the willingness to bring us all together. And so Vanessa Bealey, myself, and Miriam Sharbati, who is an expert in regard to Lebanon and the different foreign policy conversations, had a really in-depth conversation about Iran and Israel. And interestingly enough, by the way, I'm not sure whether this was secondhand information from people trying to manipulate everybody else, but I got word from somebody that there was somebody out there that I've worked with in the past that was sort of saying that I was black-pilled when it came to Iran, sort of like we're black-pilled when it comes to COVID and black-pilled when it comes to Israel, until people finally catch up that that's actually what's going on. Just I'm kind of half joking. That has been the track record, but I question myself too. But Vanessa being one of the people that was calling me out, I guess. And I was like, well, I just talked to Vanessa in this conversation and plenty of others where we align with almost everything when it comes to what's going on there. And so, one, great conversation. Two, whether or not people disagree, that doesn't necessarily mean there's like strife or negativity. I disagree with a lot of people in this field that I highly respect. But also be on guard out there, even just amongst yourselves, for people trying to manipulate you, trying to throw a social grenade in the middle of your group just to pretend, lying, misleading people about different opinions, trying to sway you to make sure that we are, looking at each other adversarially instead of realizing that we're all, whether disagreeing, fighting for the same things. But anyway, I just want to share it because it was a great discussion, and always very much respect Vanessa and her outlook on damn near everything. So starting with a interesting point that I wanted to make sure, I've touched on, in fact, the last title we had, part of it was the lie. How'd I frame it? The Trump has suddenly changed lie, which it's not the truth. I'll make that even more clear now. But really important that we really accentuate this, outline it with the evidence to look for, to engage with yourself. What's weird to me, I don't want to be hyperbolic, but I feel like it's almost every single category, every topic, every discussion point that we can see right now. You're just getting like this wholesale misrepresentation. Not like I've said in the past, not like some kind of savvy, manipulation of some of the information, but just like, here's the facts, and like a completely diametric opposite whole cloth lie. It's this. And it's if you just look, you go, well, that's just not true. And it's a lot of this stuff, but it's this administration seems uniquely dishonest, but I don't think that's unique to left or right. But that, in saying that, it's interesting because in this one point, we have the reality of what Trump was saying about Iran, like before we got here, January, like 2025, like first month and everyone's sense. If you really look through and look at the information, the tweets, the interviews, and what were they saying? Iran, bad guy. We have to take care of Iran. We have to sanction nuclear weapons, and the same story. So anybody, and this is really important to hear for the honest people out there who may watch other people that disagree with this opinion, anybody out there who is saying right now, that Trump, promised us this. He did promise no war. He did promise peace president. He yelled those things. Those were just words at rallies and what he did was always clear. In fact, what he said in other cases was also clear, at least challenged what he said there, which was Iran, bad guy. We have to stop Iran. We can't let them do this. If they don't do this, we're gonna have problem. We'll what was his framing? We'll do things they've never seen before, something like that. Which means attack, war. We can't let them continue. Vance did the same thing. And that was before this. And then you had months and months of this continuing. Then we had the June 12-day war point. And my point was, up until then, what we were saying, here comes the Iran war. We always knew was coming. Anyone paying attention long enough. And then you have that beyond it. And then it'd be like, oh, we did it. It's obliterated. Everything's fine. And we'll go through some of this again. And then from that point forward, you have all these MAGA people, the dishonest ones, not the regular conservatives that are willing to see this, but the team sport Republicans, just like the team sport Democrats, who are willing to just pretend that's not the case. When we move forward, it's all over, or pretend it's obliterated. And then you got more statements all the way up until, that was more obvious there. Now, the point in saying all that is that Trump was clear the entire time that he was going to do this. And yet you get this weird argument about how somehow he violated everything and he changed suddenly and he's not the same person. So it's important to go through this tooth and nail to make sure you can see that he's always been saying this. And so, like I said, the people that are saying that are either just incredibly bad at what they do, listening to what other people tell them these things are, or they're just lying to you. I don't know how you can misunderstand that. And then we're going to go through the rest of this that continues to add to the different points of the dishonesty, the strait, the dealings. So I want to start with a couple of points I thought were interesting. I must have deleted something. Anyway, so Miles Taylor, says, I remember the reason I'm including this, by the way, is not to just dunk on Trump, because it's easy to do, quite frankly. It's about the interesting lie. And this is just, I think, important to see, because I don't think he's what they claim he is, or as RFK literally says, he flips over a map and just draws a flawless map of the Middle East. Guys, I don't know people. I know very few people who could do that, who are very intelligent. The point is, I flatly said, I don't believe that. I do not believe that, but I could have been wrong. My point in this is the same idea, is that they're willing to lie about these things just to kind of bolster the position of somebody, or, and it's really about the dishonesty of everything they're doing and the lie of who they really are. And this is Aaron Rapport simply showing you what Leavitt says. And she says, you always want to be the most well-read person in the room. And I try to be every day, but Donald Trump always is. Now, look, you can be super well-read and not project that, not speak very intelligently. I find that we're going to counter, it's a rare experience, but I feel like I've seen people who I know have, maybe read, not understood. Anyway, the point is that does not show in what he does. He makes mistakes. He speaks ridiculously. He speaks bad grammar all the time, like a lot of them do. It's not about him alone, but to say he's the most well-read person in the room, no matter where he goes, while he's in a room full of highly educated, highly influential people, I just think that's a really stupid thing to say, but it's very Trump style. Not just that he's one of the smartest people. No, he is the smartest person, even though that's just functionally ridiculous. But he says, Miles Taylor, somebody who is an ex-national security official, says, I remember the first piece of advice I got on a briefing with Trump in the room in 2017. Now, this was actually pretty broadly discussed. Many people, left and right, were talking about this at the time. Another kind of side point about the game of the mainstream alternative narrative control. Well, just we all knew it was there, and then we all just pretend quietly like it never happened inside the mainstream conversation. But he said in 2017, he was told he doesn't read, bring pictures, only try to impress one thing on him, and if it have to be words, single page only. And this has been roundly discussed with people that the last person in the room is what he ends up listening to. So it's silly to pretend like this guy is some mastermind behind the universe when everything you see says the opposite. But consider it, right? So all that to say that they will lie about anything. And I also think it speaks to a level of desperation that I've almost never seen in this situation. So James here says, pointing to what this Ronald pro-Trump account says, Ronald Carter, I just got off the phone with someone who works in defense policy. So let's go ahead and assume right at the gate that probably didn't even happen. Just how this game works today. But always, if you don't know for sure, then that should be always something you consider, that it might not have happened. Partisanship, it's almost like a 50-50 flip at this point. They will lie about damn near anything. But he says he got on the phone with somebody who's in Washington. Okay. What they told me should end every Trump reckless argument permanently. Or Trump is reckless. The argument that he's the problem. He says, every single president since Clinton received the same intelligence. I'm sure you can, decipher where that evidence came from, the intelligence came from, if it's been every single president this entire time. So clearly it's something outside of this country. The same intelligence briefing on Iran's nuclear timeline. Oh yeah, the same timeline we've all heard our entire lives that's been different every time and never added up to the outcome that they claimed. Never, okay? And it says, every single one was told the window was closing. Okay. Every single one chose to kick it down the road because the political cost of acting was higher than the political cost of waiting. And the only way you can even decipher this right now, meaning the political cost, is detriment to American interest, killing American citizens or American military. And so, yeah, that's what you would do. Well, is it worth the killing of our people and the destruction of our country to get what Israel wants? No. Never. Well, if that's what drove their mindset, I doubt it was. The point is he's trying to say that Trump's the one that decided to go for it. That's not how he meant that, but that's the only way you could take this. And it says Trump got the same briefing, 60 kilograms, and here we are again, ladies and gentlemen, of 90% enriched uranium, and it wasn't 90%, None of them claimed that. They said that they could. 90% is the marker you have to get to make the material needed to make the nuclear bomb. They don't have that. They never have. Not even Witkoff said that. So these people are just dumb on top of being or I guess you could call it dishonest. It's at the very least naive and sharing what he was told that's not correct. 4 weeks to break out for 4 weeks. And this is, by the way, after it was supposedly obliterated by the same person he's currently cheering. Material for 2 bombs. Guys, this is all just dumb, by the way. Like, it's embarrassing. I'm not going to get into the technical stuff because I'm not even the expert, but I've done this long enough to know and gone over the expert discussion of why that's just ridiculous. I will yet again show you the 60% point. He chose to act knowing it would tank his approval to 35%. Oh, what a hero. What a reluctant, forlorn hero. Oh, I knew it was going to be bad for me, but it's going to be good for America. Where's that showing? Demonstrate for me why this is even if you take out Iran entirely. Where's the outcome where that's beneficial to Americans, American interests? It's just not, guys. He chose to act knowing his own base would split. Right, so what you're trying to say is he destroyed himself to do something for Israel. Well, I don't actually disagree. Nowhere in there did you really stress the case that this was somehow in the American interest, other than the insinuation that the information they were given was always correct, even though the very point you just made, as James calls out, kind of shows you it's not. If every president since Clinton has gotten the same intelligence briefing that Iran was on the verge of acquiring nukes, and yet it still hasn't acquired nukes, that suggests our intelligence on Iran has not been very good. It's a very kind way to write that. And on top of that, that it's not like they stuck their finger in the mix and we're like, wait, stick a smoke in the stick in the spokes. We're going to stop you. No. There's been gaps where Netanyahu was hair on fire, like weeks, months, years away, and nothing really shifted, and it just didn't happen. Many, many times, on top of the reality we've always gone over, showing you the evidence very clearly highlights this is not the case. Now, it's important to see this yet again. For those that haven't, it's really important. For those that have, just remember that this is what they're citing, and this is not some small account. The Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency at the end of 2025 said very clearly that the 60% that Witkoff lied about was within their safeguards. Right here. As stated in my most recent report. Read the whole thing, by the way. There's plenty of other information. It's not necessarily relevant to this, but it's important. Based on his inspections conducted at the relevant facilities since then, Iran's uranium stockpiles remain under safeguards in accordance with their comprehensive safeguard agreement. You may recall that more than 400 kilograms of the stockpile is enriched to 60%, not 90, 60. Maybe they're dyslexic or whatever it would mean if you invert the numbers, maybe to make it a 9. And it says it's essentially that basically essential that we continue. Now, the reason they stopped I think it was end of June 2025 was because of what they did in June, bombing Iran. Now, Iran is the one that officially said, stop. We're being bombed right now, so we're not going to maintain. So it's not. But the bottom line is, as of that moment, and it's also not even possible with what we know for them to meet something to increase to the potential bomb level within that time frame. But the point is that they said no more inspections. We're in the middle of a war. And have always maintained this before, after, during JCPOA, after, before any situation. Iran has upheld what it has been required to do with this group. And they just continue to lie about it, as they say at the bottom. The International Atomic Energy Agency will guarantee through watertight inspection systems that nuclear weapons will not be developed in Iran, like they were doing before when Trump violated the original deal they made. And every time since. And this is my point about this stuff. If you can now look, you could simply argue that he's lying, right? You can say the IAEA is lying, or Director General is working for the other team. No one's saying that. In fact, they're pointing to the IAEA as the group that's supposed to be doing this. So when that very group stands up and says that's not true, that's not happening, and then cites the very numbers that Witkoff and this guy go on to lie about, why does that not instantly get shut down? Why isn't there a fact check on Twitter? Where's the community notes? Why doesn't the corporate media break that because they're all lying or stupid or manipulated? I mean, I'm not going to say all. Well, no, I mean, I think that's actually a fair statement. Within that category probably meets every one of them. They're lying. They are too dumb to care. They're too paid off. They're too, that kind of category. But it's not honesty because you can prove it and they're lying. But yet it doesn't break through. Because people like this get millions of shares because Elon tags it with 100%, and that's how this tends to go. But the main point is, well, the intelligence, correct, has always been there, and Israel has been feeding them that since day one. Anybody who's not a moron can see this right now, guys. It has been obvious for a long time. This has been sort of allowed to be seen now for other political reasons, but they're still trying to keep a cap on this. Now, here's the White House fact sheet from February 4th, 2025. Okay, in case you're not paying attention, we're in 2026 right now. So this is February 4th, 2025, where he came out right away, a month after being put into the position that he told you he would not go to war with Iran, when he told you that there was going to be no more wars. And he says right away, restoring maximum pressure on Iran. Why? Nothing changed. There was no information. Israel was the one pushing this. You can go back to the very beginning of this, or before that, or the year before, or the administration before, and the evidence has always been the same. Everybody else argues largely that there's nothing there to prove it, and you get allegations from Israel, and the United States backs it up. Little nuances over the years, but we just saw the point. They've never done what they claim. Restoring maximum pressure on the government of the Islamic Republic of Iran was his focal point with his National Security Presidential Memorandum. And it establishes that Iran should be denied a nuclear weapon, which they weren't seeking and didn't have, and intercontinental ballistic missiles. And there was the increase from Israel. Never before had that really been the main They've discussed the idea of the use of them, and the intercontinental missile, treaty, all the different things that plays a factor on. But every country in the world has the right both to make nuclear energy and weapons should they want to, or rather, I take that back in the sense of they're supposed to be under the nuclear proliferation treaty, supposed to be winding back their growth, but the tactical nuke thing that Trump introduced completely spun that out as far as I'm concerned. The point was, though, that they have the legal right to do all this stuff. And so they added the idea that they just can't have missiles now, not just any certain kinds of missiles, but even Rubio is like, drones, they're missiles in general, they can't just build their stockpile because then they're strong. We can't allow a country we don't agree with to have their own self-sustainable power. It's just absurd. The only thing that even makes sense in some people's minds is because, well, they're terrorists. But even if they were terrorists, whatever you think that means, that doesn't invalidate their rights and laws that exist in the world. But apparently that's the thing that U.S. government's created in the world. We can yell terrorists and things don't matter anymore. But that seems to be changing. People seem to be catching on. Surprised it took 20 years. Iran's terrorist network should be neutralized. Okay, that doesn't exist. If you want to get into the reality of what Iran has done over the years that are crimes, we could go through that, and they should be held accountable for them. But if you're going to pretend that by working with, supporting other groups that are being occupied, other groups that are fighting legitimate terrorist actions, whether or not they themselves have carried out acts of the similar nature, it's like pretending, hypothetically, had Iran immediately bombed every hospital in Israel right after they were attacked illegally. I would still call all of those crimes. But I would still say the only reason they did it was because they were bombed first illegally by them, opening that door. See, there's a difference there, but they would still be crimes. In this case, the idea that you're criticizing the fact that they're supporting ideologically or otherwise, or even selling them weapons, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, Ansarallah movement, is no different than the U.S. government selling weapons and working with everybody else it does in the world. If one matters, then they both do. But that's not how this is being played. And it's also not even close to what's actually going on, comparing to what, Al-Jolani in Syria, the Azov movement in Ukraine. They're literally overthrowing entire countries and putting the terrorist groups they pretend they're fighting in power and then screening Iran's a terrorist group. Iran's aggressive development of missiles, as well as other drones and missiles. That's the same as part one. Conventional weapons capability should be countered. So all this is to show you that they're simply setting tones or lines that demand action. Well, they're not going to get rid of those things. So I could have, as I was telling you in February, well, here we go. This is going to go because Israel wants it. Now, whether Trump does it or not was the question. He opened the door in February. It was more obvious than it had been up until this point that he was going to do this for Israel. So the people that were saying, where did this come from? I can't believe it, are just either stupid or blind. And it says, taking Iran's nuclear program off the table, President Trump will not tolerate Iran possessing a nuclear weapons capability. Didn't have it. Nor will he stand for their sustained sponsorship of terrorism, especially against the U.S. Okay, so just wherever we decide to broadly say they're doing things, they can't do that, even though they're not. So then there's nothing they can do since they're not even doing that. So you create a situation where you have to do something. This was done to them. I don't think Trump even cared, but truly I think he was played very easily. And Adam Cochran points out, we'll get into this in a second, as Trump posts, today will be power plant day and bridge day. All wrapped up in one, in Iran. Massive war crimes, just casually deciding what we're going to murder human, infrastructure, civilians, just no big deal. Just put it right out on True Social. There will be nothing like it, he writes. Open the effing strait, he writes. You crazy bastard, or you'll be living in hell. Very casual. At the same time, he's telling you we're having great negotiations. Just in case that's not, we'll get to that in a second. It's just insanely embarrassing. Like, I'm truly more than usual embarrassed from what these people are doing. Not that they represent us, but how dumb this is. And Chris Murphy, who I also think is ridiculous, says, if I were in Trump's cabinet, I would spend Easter calling constitutional lawyers about the 25th Amendment. And here we go again, about removing him from power, right? Why does anybody who's not blind think that's going to help? Vance is exactly the same. He's fighting for the same things, for the same reasons, maybe a slightly more technocratic teal-leaning direction. But look at what Trump's doing. I mean, at the very least, Vance has been on board for what Israel wants, because so too is the groups that are pulling his strings, in my opinion. But he writes, Adam Cochran, I'll take it a step further. Failing to invoke the 25th Amendment at this point is a violation of their oath to the country. Now, you could even understand why that might make sense. But then if you're going to do it, then you might as well keep going until none of them are left. Because to do it once and let the next guy step in line doesn't change anything. It should be seen as nothing short of criminal negligence. Now, this is the big problem for me. I'm not sure whether this person believes it'll change anything or not, or believes that Vance is somehow a good guy. Tucker Carlson told you that, which baffles me that people don't call that out. The guy's been caught lying almost as much as Trump. He just got real quiet when this all kicked off. So I'm very worried that this one will happen and it won't change anything, and it'll give people months of time to pretend like everything's going well. Oh, just give them some time to work it all out. It's sad. But also, I'm worried that this was the entire point. Or at the very least, sort of break in glass and emergency kind of moment, because it's easy to see how this will keep the agenda going. Here's what J.D. Vance said back in June 17th, just to make sure you're not, if you're out there thinking J.D. Vance will save us from this Iran war, like Tucker and some people seem to think. Here's what he said in absolute support of everything Trump was planning in June 17th. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. It's right there. That alone sets you up for the same thing. If their intelligence told them, as Gabber did, as their own intelligence assessment showed, that they were not doing that and did not have it, what are they talking about? If Trump was the one and you supported him then, Vance, as you all laughed at everybody trying to tell you otherwise, right in that little Oval Office room, that it was obliterated and you won and it was over, then you guys are just ridiculous. And we can all see right through you, and he'll do the same things because he's giving you the same lies. The president has made clear that Iran cannot have uranium enrichment, even though every other country in the world can. And we just decide the rules unilaterally because we're totally not the policemen of the world. And he said repeatedly that this would happen one of two ways: the easy way or the other way. This is stupid. It's the hard way is the way you do that, but you can be Trump about it and pretend like you just made your own statement up. But that's a threat, guys. That's simple. So either you do what we want, or we're going to do. He tries to make it opaque so you can't claim he threatened military action because he's the peace president. Easy way or the other way. Well, we're watching the other way right now, as we told you, and we got called blackpilled, and the same old rigor. And now those same people are over there going, oh my God, look at what Jones is doing today, screaming, oh my God, Trump's lost. Look at what he's done. Well, he's the reason he's in power. Don't ever forget that. Alex Jones is almost more solely responsible for pushing people to Trump than anyone I've seen in the conversation. And here he is. And look, hopefully, honestly, still wouldn't change that he's accountable for all of this, and shouted down everybody trying to show it. And I'm willing to bet you anything he will still stand by him. In many ways, he still is, by the way. But they were always there. It was always clear if you weren't a ridiculous person. Hey, he may decide he needs to take further action to end Iranian enrichment. Right. So in June, he was already telling you, well, we may have to go to war, even though that's never going to happen because peace president. But I believe the president has earned some trust on this issue. Oh, you believe? From what? From what? Your lies about not going to war the first time, even though you totally did, like we all told you. And hopefully people are now looking back at the first administration and going, wow, looks like these people who we were all screaming at were right the whole time. And having seen this up close and personal, he goes, I can assure you that he is only interested in using the American military to accomplish the American people's goals. Whatever he does, that's his focus. Oh, really? Well, you're wrong, seeing as how everyone's calling that out, and even you are trying to be quiet about it. So were you lying, or did you just not care, Vance? It's probably a little bit of both, guys. And it's too bad we just can't see that in certain circles. You just jump to the next person in line. Sort of like when a media apparatus person in the broken mainstream gets exposed or gets fired, they just shift to the next person. Like Alex Jones, people started seeing through him, and they just kind of look for the next conservative person to listen to. Break free of the partisan control structure. But he was right there with him, and there's been 1,000 examples since then. Here on January 13th, 2025, right in the beginning. I should have put that first. VP-elect J.D. Vance signals Trump will allow Israel's war in Gaza to proceed. Right, so just a casual pro-genocide point, and sanction Iran, which was never going to stop, and we're going to continue the war. This is always there. Listen to the whole thing. It means enabling the Israelis to knock out the final couple battalions. Oh, is that what happened? Seeing as how they're still genociding Gaza and continuing the genocide in Lebanon and continuing the genocide in Syria and bombing now in Iran, clearly that all just wrapped up in a couple of weeks, right, Vance? So again, were you wrong? Are you that bad at this job, or were you lying to us? At some point, these things have to catch up with them, but apparently not in the U.S. political conversation, which, by the way, is the reason the world seems to make fun of us today. Oh, this is just a longer example where you can read through it. Same point. It was highlighted, but I lost it. The point is just about all the things discussing about what was coming, and it was all very clear. Here, February 11th, 2025. Iran alerts to United Nations. Now, this is where it gets important from Trump's perspective. Iran reached out to the UN February 11th, 2025, and said Donald Trump is threatening force against our country. Now, first of all, just take a step back and ask yourself if that's what a terrorist would do, and says it will defend itself. You guys, it's so hard to not understand this right now. Even if you think there was also an elaborate plan, everything that Trump and Israel, or the U.S. government and Israel doing, exposes the fact that this was not everything they've lied. God, I can't talk today. Everything they've said about Iran has been proven to be false. Proven. That countless ways over, from the fact that Israel has retroactively admitted they planned it. I mean, guys, it's impossible how clear this is. And so on top of everything else, from the planning to the arming of the Kurds, which we'll talk about again in a second, to the plans, the date they were going to bomb them, even though they were in the middle of negotiations, to the reality that the foreign minister of Oman admitted right before they bombed them, the night before, in fact, that they had agreed to give up everything. And all they had to do was see it through. And Israel bombed everybody. My point is that right in the beginning, they said, look, not the beginning of this iteration, they're going to hurt us. They're going to bomb us, and we want you to do something. Iran alerted the United Nations on Tuesday, and this is February 11th, to what it described as, quote, reckless and inflammatory statements by U.S. President Donald Trump threatening to use force, and warned that, quote, any act of aggression will have serious consequences. I mean, you could just jump forward to right now and recognize that makes it clear in and of itself. They bombed them illegally. We know that. Or at the very least, they bombed first. But whatever you think the threat was. And they were there going, if they do this, there's going to be problems. And they're acting within the law. In every circumstance, going to the United Nations, presenting their evidence. I mean, this goes back to Zavid Javad, or what was his name? So weird. I always mixed it up back then too. I think he was the previous foreign minister of a previous administration. And he would go to the UN and bring evidence, and they would literally just turn him away at the door. They wouldn't even let him in to the conversation about what he had evidence to prove. They just covered it up. It's always what they've done, guys. Now, look, it's actually in our interest to not lean into the good guy, bad guy binary look, because I think all governments are capable of all of this, including the Iranian government, guys. The point, though, is that right now, it's not hard to see, at the very least, where the scale of bad guy leans. And I only use that term to make it clear what we're talking about. But just, who is committing crimes? Who is killing innocent people? Who is illegally occupying territory? Who is using illegal weaponry? I mean, you just can't miss it. Now, again, in saying all that, I always come back to the point to where, I think we all do. And it just is not allowed to be represented in the mainstream alternative with all these technocratic platforms that have been hoisted on top of the conversation to keep you from seeing what's going on. Quote, these reckless and inflammatory statements flagrantly violate international law and the UN Charter. Guys, the statements alone do. The fact that he's openly telling you bombing bridges and infrastructure alone is a crime, but doing it even more so. The U.S. will bear full responsibility, he said. Iran will resolutely defend its sovereignty, territorial integrity, and national interest against any hostile action. I mean, you just imagine this being the discussion in public in February in the UN, and yet we all act like it was unprecedented. Right now, bombing back, they're claiming Iran is acting with terrorist acts. It's a cartoon. Okay, going forward, March 31st. So that was February. We're March 31st, 2025. Washington Policy Weekly. Trump threatens to bomb Iran if no nuclear deal reached. Guys, this is before the June 12-day war. So right there, he's literally going, we will bomb you forever unless you do what we want. You want to explain to me why this was confusing to anybody? Who's missing this? Who's out there going, peace, president, while he's screaming war? Morons, blind people, liars. I don't believe that's the majority. Not in the conservative area, not in the liberal. It's just not. I think people are seeing through it. Plenty of different categories and all that. Here's another one. This is April, 1 month, or what this was that March, I believe. I don't open again. So down the line, April 2025. Arms Control Association, Trump sends a letter amid military threats. It says, I hope you're going to negotiate because if we have to go in militarily, it's going to be a terrible thing. Well, look at that. March 2025, April 2025. In fact, I think it was March when the letter got sent. He's telling you, don't make us go into war if we don't get what we want. And by the way, guess who he was saying this to? Khamenei. The letter was delivered, and Khamenei, the one he murdered, says Iran is not interested in talks with a bullying government and described the missive as an attempt to deceive global public opinion. Now, look at what we're dealing with today. And they murdered this man because he would not blindly acquiesce to whatever they wanted. And then they murdered more people and they still stood by it. You could look at it in comparison to what the Palestinians are doing. Their game is to murder, threat, violate, rape, torture, and just do everything you possibly can to make people suffer so they just give up. Apparently, they've lost their touch because people aren't buying it. I mean, they're just not. At the very least, you push people to a point to where they're willing to stand anything, to withstand anything, to not let you win. We saw. Look at what the Palestinians are still going through, and effectively, they did have a major success by exposing this to the world. But look at the cost. Look at what the Israel and the U.S. governments are capable of just to, I guess, stomp their feet. They still effectively are losing, at least in some ways, but they're winning when it comes to taking the territory if we let that happen. But they're just murdering people every day right now in Gaza. We'll end with that today. So here's the long thread or the timeline, U.S. Israel bomb Iran timeline. So many, many more examples. You could go through and find them all where Trump was literally threatening the very thing that people act baffled about when it happens. June 13th, Israel launches major airstrikes against Iranian nuclear and military facilities. Now, remember, on February 28th, the night they started, they bombed them after the agreement. I won't go over it all again, but I'll include it since it's an important one if you haven't seen it, where he was literally telling them after the 28th meeting, which this was on the 28th, that they agreed. They agreed to everything. They'll get rid of their enriched uranium. They'll give up what they have. They'll agree not to do it anymore, which they never did before. And then they bombed them that night, which is very obviously clear. Now, the point is, I'm willing to bet you anybody honest would hear that and go into it and it will change their mind. But of course, the people that likely need to hear it, and usually the ones that might have much more influence or more money to donate, for example, are just algorithmically boxed away from ever seeing that we exist. It's amazing how much reach we can get and how many people we can work with and how many people in certain categories seem to not even know we exist. I think it's obvious. Point is, help us get this information to people. Make your clips, share it to them yourselves, put it in the chat, get it in there. It's not about us. It's about the information getting seen so we can actually see something change. June 22nd, the U.S. strikes Iranian nuclear facilities. And it's amazing we never talked about how incredibly dangerous that was. You know how they were all clutching their pearls about the Zaporozhye plant in Ukraine? But then they bomb them and nobody even cares, because they're all ridiculous children. If you're not going to care about if you're going to care about one, not the other, then you're either dishonest or I guess just dishonest because if you're stupid, you would at least be able to see the contradiction. But my point is always to show you that these people in this higher up, they frame themselves as somehow like the respectable, leaders of the media group. And they're just ridiculous. It's half the time the dumbest people in the room. And I'm not trying to make this some hyperbolic point. We all see what's going on right now. And we'll report things that everyone can see that barely, and half the time don't even make it through. Anyway, I digress. The bottom line here is that this goes all the way down to where we are, and you can see every single moment where Trump was telling you this was going to come to pass. It's a choice, guys. Now, on June 21st, right, just after the 12th, this would have been it would have been February 28th, so after the 12th, they were a discussion point. Here's what Trump, that's right, because it's about the obliteration. Here's what he came out and said about how clearly it was obliterated. The thing that they're still pointing to today.
Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. We assess that the American strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities has set back Iran's ability to develop nuclear weapons for many years to come. The nuclear threat of Iran, that was totally obliterated. Iran, where we wiped out their nuclear capacity for weapons. They totally obliterated the potential nuclear supply of Iran. In June, we obliterated Iran.
Now, that one's actually different because that's what Trump does. He just exaggerates, blusters. So he said the supply. He didn't say the nuclear, but the supply, which would mean enriched uranium. So for them to suddenly claim that they are that close again, which Trump did many times, weeks away, as we just pointed to. Well, that's just physically not possible, even with the numbers they're putting forward. But they're also lying about all of it.
Nuclear enrichment capacity. Last summer, I ordered devastating strikes on Iran's key nuclear facilities and achieving total obliteration.
That's February 13th, 2026. Total obliteration
Of the Iran nuclear potential capability, totally obliterated.
Now it's the potential capability. I mean, you're screwing yourself with your ridiculous blustering, Trump, because that last statement makes it very clear. They were nowhere near. But you see, the reality was, if you remember, we talked about this, as always, we go through the actual facts. We can verify. It appears, according to even Iran, they did, in fact, bomb the enrichment facility, which is almost the worst thing for them because that makes it impossible for them to be able to enrich, even if they had the material. And so they lied about whatever they were doing. But based on the obliteration point, it wasn't true. Now, you could use that point to argue that's why we know they've got bombed, but the evidence doesn't back that up. The reality is, one, again, they never were doing that, which is the evidence has always been clear, with Tulsi Gabbard also saying it from Trump's administration, International Atomic Energy Agency also backing that up in the recent 2025 point. Nothing else backs that up other than Israel screaming about it. And that Trump, interestingly told you that it was gone. So think about all of that and then suddenly telling us it's back again. It takes a special kind of stupidity, willful ignorance to just follow along. That's why I don't think most people are falling for it right now. So here, obliterated. Thank you, Richard, for sharing that. Here's the post. Iran's nuclear facilities have been obliterated. I love this part. And suggesting otherwise are fake news. Or suggestions otherwise are fake news. Okay. So you guys are fake news now in your own right, backwardly, which is hilarious. Well, here's what now came around March 2nd, 2026. 74 times President Trump has made clear that Iran cannot have. I don't even know what the point of this would be. Why do you just show us the amount of times he repeated himself? You know what I mean? Like, it's just because they wanted you to shift into this mindset. Ignore the obliterated point. Just pretend like it doesn't exist. Sort of like when Trump said ISIS was defeated 100 times, 100%, 100 times. And then weeks later would bomb ISIS or would say that there's a reason we have to fight them and then go right back to saying it again. It's almost like a psychological operation. It's like a social engineering experiment to see how blindly people will follow you even as you tell them they're lying to them. But you go through all these, right, start February 2026, and we will not allow a nuclear weapon. Right. So explain to me how literally the month, February 12th, he just said it was obliterated. And then 2 weeks later, he comes up and going, I can't. Why? Because Israel clearly started the agenda again. I don't know how anybody can miss that. You can't miss the hype in the media. Netanyahu picking up the conversation again. It's undeniably clear. Here, January 2nd, 2026. Trump says, and this is what's important about this is to show you, because we've already clearly established that he was screaming about Iran well before it was because of the immediacy of the whatever they claim was happening, even though, anyway, it's used to make fun of this so easily. But this is about the sudden hype of the protest side of this, which is now again important because of what they're now admitting on top of it, even though we already knew all of this because we were telling you from day one. Why? Because the evidence showed you that. Because you can literally see Netanyahu or Mike Pompeo publicly telling you they're arming the protesters, right? But he says Trump initially wrote on his Truth Social platform, warning Iran, if it violently kills peaceful protesters. Hadn't happened yet, but if you happen to decide to do that, somehow psychic, United States will come to their rescue, literally come to their rescue. And then afterward kind of turn around and said, well, it's up to you. He said, you clown. At least 7 people have been killed so far in violence surrounding the demonstrations. And yeah, we went over all of this. It's very clear how this started. And pretty much across the board now has been broken down. The unions were the biggest part for me. The unions themselves supported the protesters who were very much protesting their government because of the financial situation, which mostly within those would also acknowledge it was because of the U.S. action, but they were unhappy with the way Iran was dealing with it in that moment. And then the union supported them. And then when masked, armed, foreign people came rushing in, they stood up and said, this is not the same protest, very publicly. And then that became very clear. That's when you started seeing policemen burned alive in the streets and buildings burned, government. And then you can't miss this. They said, we're arming them. Even if you think they're normally protesters, that still ends up being an insurrection. That ends up being an invasion, a psyop, a proxy group, literally. So my point is, though, just like with the mines that never seem to have happened, at least in this recent point, he came out and said, if there's mines, we don't see them yet, but if there are, you'll be a line too far. And then literally that day, mines reported in the strait, but then never talked about it again. It's just such an obvious sort of like floundering is the word I use in the title today, flailing sort of clumsy propaganda effort that just is lie about everything all the time. My point, though, if you do that, and then right then they go, oh, they started killing protesters even more. We have now come around to find out those are lies based on the fact that the numbers came from Israel pretty much every time. And I don't mean that as some broad point. Literally, their intelligence. You can look at the reports. But that then overlaps with this point. And we told you this. Like I just said, so did a lot of us. So did Aaron. So did a lot of people saying this. But this is the point that I was talking about in the beginning. Yet suddenly you've got this Zionist propagandist for Fox News coming on and going, Trump just told me that we armed the Kurds. Well, guys, there was literal public reporting about that. So if it's suddenly, which by the way it is, look at Twitter, it's suddenly this breaking story. Oh my God. And then people like major influencing people or like people, what are the names of people like trying to think of some of these influencer types on carry over from COVID that are sort of scientists, but are like MAGA supporters. There's so many people out there are suddenly going, if this is true, this would mean, and I'm going, God darn it, man. What do you mean if it's true? Did you even take a second to look? It's very public. We talked about it already. So my point is the release of information. So why? Maybe because they're floundering and they need you to get some kind of a release valve. Maybe because they're using this to drive it some other direction. Maybe because they lied about all of it and they want us to believe it. The point, though, is that evidence was there and now suddenly it's being pointed to. And I think it really does matter because what we're dealing with is something they orchestrated, which even the New York Times is suggesting now at this point. But here is what Trey had to say about how they armed these people, like you already knew a month ago, or it would have been, pretty close, actually.
Now, the president also provided new details on what happened earlier this year as the Iranian regime took to the streets and slaughtered what the president tells me is 45,000 civilians in their own country.
Not true.
After that took...
Well, remember, and that Trump told him. So at the very least, that means Trump is repeating what he was told by people. And look, you know where that's coming from. It's just not true. The people, Iran has admitted about 3,000, but saying that the vast majority of those were people who were literally rioting to bring down the government. And you know very well, as now he's about to tell you that they did arm those people, that if that was happening in Washington, D.C., you think Trump would just let him go? Now, it doesn't make one right versus the other or right, wrong. It's wrong regardless if you're talking about executing protesters. If you're talking about armed insurgents who are being brought down, well, that very much changes the story, doesn't it? So what we would do as individuals is require evidence. Not take a side, not then go, well, all of them should be or all of them are not. That's what they want from you. Demand evidence. And if you don't have it, proof even, you just leave it there and you wait for more. But you have to understand how that would work. And so that's the line, right? So if they're accusing them all of being illegal people, then we would demand an investigation, evidence. And if they all come out and just go, intelligence says, then we should doubt that from anybody. So the point is that some people just want things to resolve because they've been sort of trained in this kind of like, animal pellet system where all of a sudden, like every story comes out and they go, bing, and they give you, that's the story. And then it's this cycle where you feel like there's been resolution and there's never really evidence to back it up. Most times in my experience, the stories just flounder. They just sit there. There's nothing it's a narrative and you get arguments. There's a level of evidence, but it just never changes. And that's how we have to acknowledge those things.
President Trump told me to the streets and slaughtered what the president tells 45,000 civilians in their own country. After that took place, President Trump told me the United States sent guns to the Iranian protesters. He tells me we sent them a lot of guns. We sent them through the Kurds, and the president says he thinks the Kurds kept them.
Now here's the game. In my opinion, the way I'm reading this is that this is an effort to hide because they know we see this. That's the way this seems to work. They know it's obvious. And if it gets enough reach, this is the kind of thing I expect. Acting like we're breaking the story, but to redirect it in a certain way. Because again, I can show you the articles that came out a month ago, very clearly show you that. Arming the Kurds, or Pompeo and Netanyahu publicly telling you they're arming the protesters. Saying that Mossad is in the streets. These are all public. We went over these in previous shows. So what I think this is an effort to, one, kind of shift blame a little bit, but ultimately try to make it sound like we were just trying to help the group that the U.S. government's always armed. And it doesn't change anything. Just because they've worked with the Kurds in the past doesn't change that arming them in the situation was a crime. But ultimately that we tried to give them to the protesters, but the Kurds took them. I kind of get the sense that Trump might have bungled that narrative, that it should have been the other way around. Think about it, right? But telling us that you armed the protesters, there's no way you can make sense of that. Because then you turned them into the very thing that would justify them being shot in your mind, in the minds of Trump, in the minds of Netanyahu. In every circumstance, you throw a rock at somebody in Israel, they'll shoot you. But you're going to tell me that armed protesters, because you support them, are suddenly not allowed to be touched? They've lost themselves, guys. They have utterly lost themselves. They're drowning in the lies they've created.
He went on to say, we sent guns to the protesters, a lot of them. And so a number of headlines here from my conversation with President Trump. All of this taking place more than a month into Operation Epic Fury and in the aftermath of that successful U.S. operation overnight to rescue that stranded
There was a lot of dispute about whether it was successful.
U.S. service member inside Iranian territory. The president himself ordering that operation after the CIA came on Saturday morning and confirmed that they located where this crew member of an F-15 that was shot down on Friday was located.
Isn't that funny? Like, think about that. So you're telling me you could just randomly we're going to find him somewhere in a couple days. We got him. He's right there. And then all these examples over the years of all these times where things just never get found, or there's never, a shooter, Butler. I mean, any number of things. It makes you, one, wonder whether that actually went the way it did. Is that actually how it happened? Or two, are there other circumstances where they pretend they can't when there's a reason they don't want to? Question everything.
Again, the president making that decision to send in hundreds of U.S. special forces deep into Iranian territory.
And there you go.
And successfully retrieving that U.S. service member.
Right. Oh, so there were boots on the ground. Funny how that works out. Funny how people were like foaming at the mouth to argue that wasn't the case. And I've been telling you from the beginning, and I stand by based on some evidence, but my opinion largely because the Kurds, I think, were obvious. Army of the protesters were obvious. You can argue that becomes a proxy element for them. Guys, it's historically in almost every circumstance I've been involved in investigating, like past wars, the ones I've seen in my process in doing this. It almost always turns out that they have some kind of element on the ground. And I think you can see that with the past examples of those fake revolutions and the fake protests. But so my point was, I'm pretty sure that they have elements on the ground. And then this came out, and I said, okay, well, then troops were deployed. If you can get into the ridiculous game they play, we're going, well, the word deployed means this many number of troops. Whatever. That's silly. The word deploy is obvious, not some weird military version of it. It means you put people there. Okay. At the end of the day, boots on the ground means a pair of boots on the ground. I don't care if you then pretend if one guy doesn't count. Fine. If you from within a military context, then fine. I'll give you that. But to average people who don't care about the way you play these games and lie about numbers, you just put boots on the ground, which is what you promised you would never do, which you swore up and down, across the board, even after you started the war, you swore you wouldn't start. Well, we won't put boots on the ground. It'll be in and out, surgical targeted operation, a few days, maybe a few weeks. No, too late. Lie after lie after lie. Or maybe you thought maybe they were just too blind to see that wasn't going to go that way. But guess who was telling you that it was going to go that way? Not because we knew for sure, but because we were looking at the evidence, like a lot of us were. Because these people are either being lied to by Israel or they knew this wouldn't happen and they didn't care what you thought. They didn't care about Americans. I kind of feel like it's somewhere in the middle. They deployed hundreds of troops, so we're being told. And we're going to come back to that. I think I'll just finish this out.
Guys,
I want to make sure I got this correctly. Are you saying that the president told you that he sent guns?
Yes. Wait a minute. You mean like they've done 1,000 times in our Syrian rebels and what's so funny before actually where are we getting into next here? I think we'll come back to we'll get to the pilot discussion in a minute before I get into that because I want to get into that point about that there's a lot of different misrepresentations and lies, the historical how often they funded elements like this, or what I was going to say would be like right now, if Obama was here, he would have left that pilot to die. Probably not. But either way, I don't think any of these people are good people. But this game you guys play where you whatever happens, Obama, I'm trying to compare it to COVID where, if I hadn't gotten the shot, it would have been a lot worse. It's sort of like a weird inversion of the way that's working where if Obama was here, it would have been worse. They're all ridiculous, guys. This game where people lose themselves in their Elvis worship of a politician. You guys should be embarrassed with yourselves. So Trump confirms the U.S. and Israel, by definition, armed anti-government protesters. This is what the Iranian government responded to in January, and he rightly points out, just as any government would have. Simple. There's really no misunderstanding that. They're telling you they did it, which would change the situation. I mean, I kind of don't know why they would admit this unless it is Israel trying to collapse this country in on itself, which I think is one of the possibilities, because they said that out loud many times. Brian Krasenstein says, breaking, WTF, and writes this, well after it was breaking. Trump sent guns to Iranian protesters, but never got to the protesters' hands. Instead, he armed the Kurds who refused to fight. Why? Because Trace says it out loud? Because you think it's a worthy point to gasp at? I mean, this is the kind of dumb stuff you get from all partisans. The right response would be, well, maybe Trump's lying, but we should look at the facts we have, not just using it to shout and go, ooh, look, and we got him, and he's a liar. That's what Brian does every day, like most of them. Doesn't mean there aren't things he says that I'll use to point to, because I try to point to wherever I see it first. 25th Amendment, this guy, please. Right. Yeah, hurry up. Get J.D. Vance in there so the whole thing can continue. The point, though, sent guns to Iranian protesters. That should be a big deal. But they never got to them. Like, are you now mad about that? Armed the Kurds who refused to fight on our side. So the issue is that he didn't successfully start the regime change? Pick a lane, bud. Like, what are you talking about here? But this is what you get from these people. But I said breaking, they publicly told us they did this, right? And here's Sarah Abdallah showing you. We reported tonight on Channel 14, foreign actors are arming the protesters in Iran with live firearms. And you saw Mossad publicly say that. Here's Mike Pompeo. To every Mossad agent walking beside them in these protesters on Happy New Year. And we saw it from the Israeli government where they said this. Mossad is in the streets. But in addition, I think that's why Mike said it afterward. Either way, guys, you just can't deny it. Now, of course, they could be lying. Yes. The reality, though, is the evidence has been clear for a long time now. So they armed him. It's not news. It was out before, but important to see that they manufactured this. They organized this. They created this situation to get what they wanted, like they do everywhere, and then blamed Iran. Doesn't make Iran good guy, but it clearly makes them not the aggressor in the situation. But here in the Kurds point, remember we pointed this out? Trump says he told Kurds not to enter the war. I laughed. You know why I laughed when I read that? Because they already did. Because we already knew this. Because he already knew this, unless he's being played by everybody. So I think this was him trying to distance himself from it, because he just tries to blame everybody around him and shuck off responsibility constantly. It's pretty weak. Here, Jerusalem Post, the month later, or no, that was the 8th. This one was, same day. It says, Trump pragmatically changes course, has no interest in Kurds' offensive in Iran. Yeah, as they're engaging with the offensive. What a clown, right? I mean, that's late. At least own your actions, man. But at the end of the day, now he's saying, we sent him to protesters, but Kurds got him. Well, you sent the weapons to the Kurds. That was publicly reported. So the point is, guys, this is a game of manipulation. They funded anyone they could get weapons in their hands. That's what happens every time. They funded any protesters and really what we're talking about is any extremist element that they could shuffle in from one of the other elements, like from Syria, where they rushed in people. That's all been verified. Jelani, I mean, they publicly had a conversation about sending support. It's just always that clear. And now he's trying to lie to you. Now, on that note, actually, of pointing to where I saw it first, I'm not familiar with this platform. And it sounds like the younger kid sounds like he's reading this on there, but I think he does a pretty good job. So here we shout it out. Now, and it's got a lot of reach, by the way, so maybe I'm wrong about who it is, but I've never seen it before. It's Sovereign Media, but it just sounds like a younger guy in the clip. But it simply says the New York Times joins a long list of institutions, influencers, and politicians that concede that the riots in Iran at the start of the year were a result of foreign meddling, because it was very obvious for a long time now. But yes, I'm glad to see that even larger platforms are starting to acknowledge that. But you see this, it's either because of a release valve and using it to redirect, or because it's just so obvious that they can't not point it out and lose credibility. I mean, it's a game of both.
Remember those protests in Iran at the start of the year? The protests that Iran's authorities said were foreign-backed? That anti-imperialist experts determined were Mossad and CIA-backed? The ones that CIA officials themselves said Mossad were involved in? Well, another imperialist media outlet has now conceded that these were not organic protests at all, but rather the handiwork of Mossad. The New York Times admits that the riots that spread across Iran in January were done so by Israel's Mossad to weaken the state's ability to defend itself, so when the US and Israel launched a war, the state would be toppled. The riots.
So hypothetically, think about that, right? I 100% believe that. They've done it my entire life, but doubt it, question it, like everything. But think about it. With what we know, seems likely, right? And the idea that what we're talking about is that you did this planning, like think about the assassination of Khamenei. Think about the actions they've taken everywhere. It suddenly becomes terrorism, guys. It suddenly doesn't become, it always was, but you should now see it through that lens. You've maliciously, surreptitiously manipulated the situation, hurt people, and then turned around and go, Iran is hurting people. We have to help them. Well, you're hurting them. Then armed the crazy people you bring out everywhere who just indiscriminately murder anyone around them, kill people trying to protect the people on the ground. I mean, it's the same story everywhere you go, from Ukraine to Syria, every single situation. And these have been proven on this show and plenty of others. James Corbett's been doing this since I started doing this. And he has always been breaking these things down, going back to stories that you probably never even heard of. So they organized this, they executed this, and are now trying to use what they created to justify more violence, more control, more occupation, like every other point we've talked about.
Were triggered by decades of U.S. sanctions on Iran, which impacted Iran's currency. This is otherwise known as hybrid warfare.
They have riots in the street. They have horrible inflation, the worst in the world.
Although this plan...
Don't forget the percent, and plenty of people proudly told you they did that. Anybody with a brain already knows that, but then they turn around and go, Iran can't manage its finances. So if they have to lie about something like that, answer the question, guys.
Failed spectacularly due to the resilience of the people of Iran and the state that protects them. The talking point about organic protests condemning the so-called regime still pollutes discourse within the West, preventing solidarity with Iran even as they fend off two nuclear powers. By accepting the imperialist narrative that the riots were organic, many within the West have taken a neither Washington nor Tehran approach, failing to condemn their own government's decades-long aggression on Iran. The hybrid warfare model of sanctions, sabotage, and now all-out war was meant to decapitate Iran completely, leaving it open to American capitalists to privatize and take over Iran and its resources.
And like everyone you've seen, you take a look for yourself. You pick Iraq, Syria, Libya. They destroy it. They reap what they didn't sow, and then they leave it in chaos. And maybe just leave, never leave the presence, keep it in chaos. But sometimes they just literally officially occupy. But the point is, you keep them in chaos so you can constantly reap the benefits that you did not work for.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent even openly admitted to using financial manipulation in order to push Iranians to the street and overthrow the government.
Treasury, and what we have done is created a dollar shortage in the country. It was a run of the bank. The central bank had to print money. The Iranian currency went into free fall. Inflation exploded, and hence we have seen the Iranian people out on the street.
I mean, how can we be in a world where you can say that so publicly? What? Because, Iran's evil, so we're going to collapse the infrastructure for the people we claim we're trying to help, which will kill people. Because in the long run, we'll get rid of the evil guy, who will then replace with a guy who's way worse, like we've seen in every situation. I mean, but you could publicly say, we did this. We manipulated the finances, which is why people are trying to get away from the dollar control, to collapse their research, collapse their financial system. And then people protested, and because of what we created. Then Trump stands up and goes, look at what they're doing. The protesters will back you. It's just artificial. Embarrassingly so. And this is what they're grappling with. Take a step back from all of it if you're listening and you're new to this. What I just described there is what's happening everywhere. And whether you think it or not, and I could be wrong, but whether you see it or not, they see it. And the power structures are scrambling in my mind because it's just lazy. It's obvious. People aren't buying it anymore, at least from a U.S. perspective. And so what I'm talking about is the effort to transition us into something different, because the game is just not working anymore. Now, at the very least, give that some thought, because I think it's everywhere we're looking right now.
Continue monitoring all the partners, all the Iranian partners.
Iran has destroyed all of these plots and is now continuously delivering blow after blow to American regime bases, as well as blows to the Israeli occupation. Even the mainstream media which worked tirelessly to denounce Iran during the riots, is admitting that the plan failed. One has to ask those who refuse to stand in solidarity with Iran. If you cannot respect a nation's sovereignty, if you ignore basic facts brought before you, can you really stand for a people under siege?
Now, I would argue.
Remember those protests?
Might as well just show it so you can see the. I would argue that you don't have to stand in solidarity with anybody if you don't want to. You can just simply identify the information, right? You can call this out and say, well, they're lying about that. Well, that's a crime and that shouldn't be allowed, right? But you don't have to stand in solidarity. They always want you to choose a side. You don't have to do that. But if you feel you need to, or you feel like it's important, or you genuinely feel we're dealing with a good guy, bad, well, it's up to you. You make those choices for yourself. But the idea that you're supposed to, that's not the reality. I mean, anybody with a brain can call out that this war was illegally started. And that you can still also argue that Iran is doing evil things. I disagree with that in the broadest sense, but it doesn't change the fact that they started an illegal war, right? So this is why it's so important to be able and willing to have sometimes contentious conversations when it comes to the information, but amicably disagree and just go, well, it's not always malicious when somebody has a different opinion. They need you to hate each other. They need you to be divided based on information because they want you to stop looking at them. Now, here's what Ghalibaf, remember the guy in the beginning that Israel claimed Trump was speaking with, turns out not to be the case. And I think they either were trying to get him killed or they're just trying to, or Trump maybe made it all up for all I know. But he says 8 hours ago to Donald Trump, your reckless moves are dragging the United States into a living hell for every single family, and our whole region is going to burn because you insist on following Netanyahu's commands. Make no mistake, you won't gain anything through war crimes. He says the only real solution is respecting the rights of the Iranian people and ending the dangerous game. He also says, we followed the money. I found this interesting. He says, last week, we're going to go into one quick point about finances before we go into the negotiation part. Last week, he writes, the same as Ghalibaf, a handful of bankers and hedge funds met, decided to hold Washington's Iran war policy hostage, then launched a campaign. Name names. And so he's not giving any information past that. So he's asking if they should release the names, he could be lying, of bankers and hedge fund managers who just basically decided to hold Washington's policy hostage. And I get the sense he's clearly referencing some sort of technocratic Israel thing, because that's what he's talked about in the past. But 71% of people out of 20,000, let me refresh it real quick. Yeah, about 18,000 votes, 71,000 said yes. So it could be a hype, could be a lie, but maybe he's going to release some information about the Wall Street side of this, which is always a part of these wars. Bankers' wars, right? Now, on that financial point, this is going to be important, I think, for anybody who cares about what's going on in this country, but for those who really think outside of everything, maybe you against the war, against certain things, but you think that somehow Trump is helped the country when it comes to finances, or, it's just not true. And I think what we're dealing with is, more spending, bigger government. Basically, everything was a lie. And what we're now finding out is that the $1.5 trillion military budget they're requesting comes at the expense of basically everything that the country wants and needs. Which, if you need to understand, in my opinion, this is what our government does. I'm not sure why Trump is either more clumsy about it or he's being used to expose it to make it collapse around his feet for the larger agenda, like we worried about in the first administration. I don't know. But just make sure you don't think it's just the way it's probably more bombastic and more obvious, but look at the past administrations. It's a lot of hype and a lot of narrative, and the same things get funded, the same agendas continue. But as Ron points out, they're just completely hollowing out what little services are left. This is dictionary definition of taxation without representation. One of the argued reasons why the revolution happened in the first place. But headquarters, and I did check this, save for like one small variation on how some of the money is spent in one itemized thing here, it seems to be exactly correct. Trump is seeking to pay for his new $1.5 trillion military budget by cutting the following. Now, this is seeking. It's not happening yet. But understand that this is on the table when you look at what they're presenting for this. I'm not going to read them all, but guys, $510 million. Grants for farmers, agriculture research. That's cutting that. $82 million. Loans for rural small businesses. $61 million. Support for farmers, food markets. $240 million. Schools, meals, food education, children abroad, $659 million. Community building grants, $47 million. Support for minority-owned businesses, $449 million. Economic development grants for communities, $1.6 billion. Weather forecasting, fisheries, coastal protection, NOAA, almost $1 billion. Scientific research and technology standards. Yeah, who cares about standards and process? Just let Peter Thiel do whatever he wants. Shut up. $150 million support for American exports and trade. $2 billion broadband internet access programs. I mean, I'm willing to bet you it relates to the control, regulation, safety, something like that, because they're screaming forward with 6G. But look, $8.5 billion funding for public schools. Now, look, you may disagree with all of it, some of it. The point is not whether you agree with all of it or, some of the things we're pointing out, but that he has publicly claimed that this was not going to be the way this went. And of course, you can stand back and go, well, he didn't, even though he did absolutely plan this and absolutely initiated illegally without justification. You could argue that he had to do it, and this is not his choice now. That'd be a lie, but you could argue it. $1.5 billion, vocational training, adult education. I mean, you go down the list, guys. Roads, bridges, college, scientific research, environmental cleanup, cutting-edge energy clean research. $150 billion $4 billion for help paying home heating and cooling bills for low-income families. I mean, just on and on. Look at this list. $2.5 billion, clean drinking water, water infrastructure. Yeah, it's not important. Go to war, because that's literally what he's saying you need this for, guys. You just saw the clip. I'll play it right now. We can't do health care. We have or create daycare. We need to go to war. You mean the war that we said wasn't a war, that you actually promised you wouldn't do, that you're the peace president? It's just sad. Very sad. People to power point this out.
You win in November. Can you commit to prioritizing legislation to make childcare affordable? And if so, what specific piece of legislation will you advance?
Well, I would do that. Childcare is childcare. There's something, you have to have it. In this country, you have to have it. We're going to make this into an incredible country that can afford to take care of its people, and then we'll worry about the rest of the world. Let's help other people. But we're going to take care of our country first. This is about America first. We can't take care of daycare. We're a big country. We have 50 states. We have all these other people. We're fighting wars. We can't take care of daycare. You got to let a state take care of daycare, and they should.
Okay, so what's the only difference? War. We're fighting wars. We can't do all this. Well, okay, he just said before in being in the position that that's what he would do. So was he lying? Well, it's hard to say, because my opinion is that Trump will, and maybe he means it when he says it, but Trump will say whatever, like most politicians, you want to hear. Again, maybe he meant it at the time, but this is the point. Whether he meant it or not, what his track record shows is that he doesn't care when it comes to the moment. It's about whatever he needs, what his interests are, what the agenda will be, even if he somehow warps that into being in your long-term interest. Never seems to happen. So again, whether the intention is or not, you're being lied to. You're being misled. He's not doing what he's claiming. And this is just one point in 1,000 of them, but it's really about the bigger picture of what it's really going to. War, as always. And those of us who have been standing back, administration to administration, even before Trump's first, showing you it never changes. I'm hoping people, and I believe that's what's going on right now, are starting to go, man, look at this. Look at these grouping of people who are nonpartisan, who are just constantly correct about what they seem to be doing and how long it goes, and not veering away in certain partisan games or during midterms or during elections. They just stand to their principles. They stand with their beliefs. It's crazy, right? And compare it to a cartoon like Alex Jones or anybody else, and it's striking. It's impossible to miss. Pull me out of the equation. There's tons of other people out there that are doing this way before I ever started, and just don't get pointed to. There's a reason for that, guys.
Pay for it, too. They should pay. They have to raise their taxes, but they should pay for it. And we could lower our taxes a little bit to them to make up. But it's not possible for us to take care of daycare.
When he lied then, or he was wrong the first time.
Medicaid, Medicare, all these individual things, they can do it on a state basis. You can't do it on a federal.
Oh yeah, except all the countries that you've destroyed that were doing that. Like Libya and what was the one I was talking about? Iran, for example, in some cases. That Libya was a perfect example of that had free education, free healthcare, and they literally destroyed it because they wanted what they coveted, what it had. They wanted to stop its gold-backed dinar. They wanted to stop it for independence. They wanted a number of things, in my opinion. Either way, they said, get rid of your nuclear arsenal and we'll let you be. And they did, and they destroyed him. And then he was raped in the street to death. Not a joke. And of course, Hillary laughed about it and they all moved forward. They didn't do anything for them, by the way. All the Libyans they claimed they were saving by doing that, they left them to the slave markets that were there and developed after they left. And then years go by, no one was talking about it anymore, but it was a horrible place because of what they did to it. And then it became this kind of warring thing with, Haftar and the different groups of the UN-backed, US-backed groups fighting each other. Meantime, all that time, guess who suffered the whole time? The people they claimed they were trying to save. Like every other location they've ever claimed they were saving people. You think I'm lying about that? You're not paying attention.
We have to take care of one thing, military protection. We have to guard the country.
That's it. No, and it doesn't mean guard the country in case you're not paying attention. He means invasion, occupation, destruction, military bases, because they believe that means protect the country. It doesn't. Not even remotely. Even if you think it's about defense, that ends up causing the very thing and blowback. And it's the whole long-term story. And it's not just because it's being there, it's what they do when they're there. History speaks for itself. Here's what somebody posted beneath this. I just seen this down below. What you voted for, lower grocery prices. What you got, higher grocery prices. What you voted for, less government, you got weaponized DOJ, DHS, DOD, government control everywhere. Lower gas prices became highest gas prices since 2022. Make us America safe became terror attacks and threats, or at least the claim and the threats, which either whether false or not, are coming because of what they created. Strengthen global relations, alienated our allies. End the war in Ukraine, absolutely nothing because it's still ongoing. Make America first, America's been last. End all wars, no new wars. 9 countries bombed, 1 invaded, another soon. Yeah, guys, you can blind yourself to it all you want. Everybody knows it's there. Now, Ali Abunimah from Electronic Intifada points out military personnel who are leaving the Middle East are finding themselves unable to pay their bills and the government's not helping. Evacuation of U.S. troops from Middle East base sends community groups scrambling to help. As he says, extraordinary American soldiers forced to flee Bahrain and other countries after Iran destroyed their bases, which we'll get to despite them lying about it, arrived in the U.S. with nothing and are turning to local charities because the $1 trillion budget that Pete Hegseth's Pentagon can't even provide basic supplies. Evacuated back to the United States from their base in Bahrain after the base was attacked by drones. A call went out to community groups asking for basic supplies like hygiene products. The base was asking for donations because they were coming back with nothing. How is that even possible with what? Well, because the money goes towards their agenda at the expense of everything. And largely to Israel, which again, it's not even a joke. It's the reality. Look at the information, look at the funding, look at the wars, look at the long-term plan. 5 countries, 7 years, 7 countries, 5 years, and the whole thing. On top of that, as we've already been telling you, Trump has gifted his entire life, this is grifted, his entire life. Now he's just taking it, says Lorraine Evanoff. This is about the $1.25 billion on top of everything else that he's just taking for the Board of Peace. The State Department has already transferred, as we told you, it's kind of bombshell breaking news for a lot of people right now, even though we told you about it last week. $1.5 billion in foreign aid to Trump's Board of Peace, pulling $1 billion from international disaster assistance, $200 million from peacekeeping operations, and $50 million from international organizations. Now, regardless of whether you think they should go to those things or not, the point is your tax dollars are going to something that is outside United States control. It's going to something Trump personally runs for the rest of his life that works with Witkoff, Jared Kushner, Tony Blair, like terrible people, like the worst people in the room. And they're supposed to be the Board of Peace while they're committing genocide and lying about Iran's negotiations. He's robbing you right now. Money that Congress, by the way, on top of that, had authorized for other purposes. So on top of the fact that it's illegal because of what it is, he's making it's a secondary crime because they already authorized it for something else, and he's just taking it. When reporters asked the State Department about it, the spokesperson said they had nothing to announce at this time. Very telling answer. The Board of Peace has one defining characteristic: Trump controls it forever. He named himself chairman for life, which is just insane. No audits, no transparency, no requirements. This is what I argued was the new global order he's trying to build. Countries pay $1 billion to enter, except Israel, because they're special, apparently. It's the truth. They don't have to pay the $1 billion, and has transferred nothing to Gaza, even though that's what they claim it's about. Disclosed nothing about its spending and received $1.25 billion. I'm willing to bet you this is currently funding their war right now for Israel. Not that really, if you look at the big picture, that's a small amount, but in this moment, they needed it. And Catherine Austin Fitts says, yep, Congress has the power to reverse that. Why aren't they? You know why? Because they're involved, guys, left and right. They're all a part of it. Now, former Army Chief of Staff, who was fired by Pete Hegseth, has spoken up and basically, in a very subtle way, suggested that we deserve leaders of character. Didn't really blast too much, but I think the subtle point was there, that where we are is not leaders of character. I think everybody can see that. Now, here's an interesting back and forth, because if you didn't see this conversation, we'll point this in a second, is, excuse me, it's very interesting. Now, I'm not sure whether you can, there's a lot of, as always, misinformation flying around about just about anything today, but they did fire a lot of people in very weird ways that nobody can get any answers about. The question, the wonder was whether this was some sort of transition of power. And I've been saying this from the very beginning of this administration, the lack of ethics pledges, the influence from Israel, the influence of the tech world, the Palantir, any number of elements. I mean, this government has been sold out a long time ago. Whatever we're watching right now seems to be a wholesale transition away from anything we thought we were dealing with. And this might be because of people are watching. Not everybody's on board. I'm not saying I can confirm this is even what's going on, but keep it in your mind, because this is an interesting shift. It is, as far as I can tell, it is unprecedented. And here's the way he responded when asked about this from Congress.
How many generals and admirals have you fired?
I don't know the exact number. But
you don't know the number. It's 8.
Okay, take a second and think about that. You're going to tell me he doesn't know that it was 8? Does anybody believe that? That's insane. At the very, you would, by answering 8, it would have been better for you, Pete. It would have made you look less like a sociopath. I don't know why.
Can you explain why any of them were fired? Like, just explain why was the Army JAG fired? Why did you fire him?
They all serve at the pleasure of the president. And I think
no, I'm just asking you why.
General Kane is a great example.
I'm just asking you why. That we need. You probably learned at Princeton what why means. Why did you fire him?
They serve at the pleasure of the president, and we want better representation in each and every of those.
You can't explain why you fired any of them?
Gentleman's time's expired.
Jeez. Most transparent administration in history, ladies and gentlemen, clearly. Yeah, so, wonder whether this is some kind of a coup. That's not that hard to wrap your mind around, guys. This society has jumped at shadows around those things, and rightly consider them, we should, for far less evidence. And I'm telling you, there's something very off about, I shouldn't have to slow walk this. It's very clear that there's something alarming going on. And it seems like everybody can feel it. I talk to anybody, anywhere, and whether they're really seeing it or not. I was just talking to pretty much my best friend. He lives in a different place now, so we don't talk as much. But he said the same thing. He's like, this feels like we're in something, like we're all in purgatory or something. Like there's some kind of weird, different feeling. It's like whatever you want to think. Oh, I forgot to mention in the beginning, by the way, which that brought to mind. I have some interviews coming up tomorrow. I'll be interviewing with, I think both will probably come out tomorrow, but Patrick Henningsen, he was recently in Iran. I'm not sure if he still is. And our What the Hell is Happening with Charlie Robinson. But the other point was, and I just lost it. I just completely lost what I was talking about. That's so funny. Yeah, it's so frustrating. I mentioned those other two to give that point some context, and then I forgot. Anyway, I guess back to the point. That drives me crazy. Something else I wanted to tell you was about the upcoming interviews. God, that's so crazy. So I swear my mind locks down when I'm trying to look for something. It's just normally it's there. It's so weird. Anyway, at least the two things were important. I did want you to know was that I'll be doing those tomorrow with them, which will likely be in lieu of the show. I'll be talking about most of that same stuff in there. Oh, that's what it was. Thank you for somebody saying purgatory. So my friend saying that about what's going on. And that just brought to mind. Oh, that's what it was. There we go. Thank you for the K Fuji for writing that. It reminded me. Was that I have another interview, which will be in a couple of days. I'm not sure exact what day, but later in the week, another follow-up with Bibhu Dev Misra, the author of the Yuga Shift. More of an esoteric perspective, but his focus is really on the factual, what you can prove, kind of overlapping it with the lore and the stories. But the point of that being mentioned is that it's just there's a very clear opinion through that conversation that argues that what they're all regarding 2030 is some kind of massive transition. People talk about the pole shifts and all kinds of stuff. I mean, there's evidence to consider about all these things. And so it's worth considering that this is some kind of weird thing we're dealing with. And that's why everyone's feeling it. But, all the unverifiable stuff aside, I just want to include that I'll be doing those interviews. Back to the point. Consider that this is some kind of massive element, shift, change, cover up happening because of what we're discussing. Because there might be something massive going on that is drifting away from what we always thought we were, or that you have another force taking over this country out of the hands of what once was run by the Constitution or guided the government. It's hard to say. But as this writes, the United States is facing an unprecedented constitutional crisis as a massive rift has opened between the White House and the highest levels of military leadership. This is getting a lot of traction but most of it's unverifiable. It says the internal standoff follows reports that dozens of high-ranking generals collectively balked at orders to initiate large-scale ground offensives. Now I'm seeing tons of videos from people going, I talked to my friend in the military. So I'm starting to question whether every one of them has a friend in the military, all willing to break the rules to tell you that they've denied this. I trust me. The sentiment, I almost feel I know is true. Whether or not those guys on Instagram saying they talked to somebody is actually true. I do know people who have family and friends that are in the military who have given some similar sentiments. We do know Mike Preisner, for example, right in the beginning, came out and told you that there were people being deployed. Remember that? Right in the beginning? That was one of the reasons we talked about that, and that they were being lied to and told it was training. Doesn't that all suddenly come back around? Let's see if I have that. Yeah, right here. Perfect. That's a good one to include. In fact, for this very conversation today, because doesn't that then show you these reports of servicemen deployed under the guise of training show you that this is all coming? They're lying because it has always been happening, which we'll get to in a second even more. But the idea of the generals collectively balking at the orders, I mean, I get the sense that might be what we are, but I can't prove it. The dismissal of 12 top officials, including chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, represents the most significant purge of military leadership in modern American history. Legal scholars are debating whether the general's refusal constitutes a lawful rejection of an illegal order. It's a fair point. Or an act of insubordination that threatens civilians' control of the military. Proponents of an invasion argue that the commander-in-chief has the absolute authority to direct military strategy. And the point is simply that we should wonder what this is and what's driving it. Now, of course, you get this from the classic, this C3 is one of these propaganda, very clear, hardcore partisan MAGA supporting accounts. They're the one, oh my God, Obama's going down. I was going to show you more today. It doesn't have to happen every day, but there's like 7 more articles, same groups, the skiff, whatever else going, oh my God, Obama's information is coming down. They're going after Obama. Pelosi's going to be in jail tomorrow. I doubt it. I doubt it. Yeah, it's been there the entire time. You know the story. It's painful how often, these same accounts do the same things. So here we have this story, right? And what they're doing is illegal. What they're doing is wrong. Almost every American that I can see doesn't agree with it. Conservatives are clearly not supporting it. And quick step back. Don't remember all the Fox, even CNN going, most Republicans support the war. They do not. So even CNN was lying for Donald Trump. Make sure you think about that for a second. And so a point, C3 says, anyone get the feeling? Okay, so out of the gate, make sure you recognize he's giving you a woo-woo feeling sentiment that's based on nothing but his opinion. And it says the deep state tried to remove Hegseth so they had control of the military. Is that it's a question, I guess? They didn't want a man with "We the People" on his arm. On his arm. Right. Because the tattoo means he believes it, right? Even though he's working for another country. Got it. In control of the military while POTUS Trump cleans up the mess they created to save the American world. They're cleaning up the mess, which looks like belligerence and violence and terror and torture and military. Yeah, but it's cleaning the world. Just pretend, right? Ignore all the terrible things you're seeing and just pretend that that's what it looks like to clean up the world. Just a little bit of genocide as you do, a little bit of robbing, stealing, and torture. It'll all work out in the end. Trust C3 because they know they had a feeling. The bottom, and then protect Pete. This is just shameless efforts, which, by the way, seem to be getting a lot less engagement these days. Who knows why? I think most of this has been driven by the platform, and I think it's becoming embarrassingly obvious now. Either way, at the end of the day, this is just about trying to get you to stop paying attention, I think. Fact check, whatever this platform is. I just thought it's news. Whatever that says. MEAWW.com. This is just one of the reports that I found. Again, first one that I came across that I was looking at that thought was reasonably well over. The simple point, are U.S. soldiers refusing to be deployed in Iran? Now, you can read through this. I think the evidence is pretty clear. You know, the ongoing U.S.-Iran war has now entered its third week with no ceasefire in sight. Intense aerial campaigns have severely degraded Iran's missile, drone, and naval capabilities, which is not really the case for the most part. But it says, meanwhile, Iran has retaliated by closing the strait. Also not true. We'll get into a second. Launching attacks on regional U.S. bases, allies, triggering broader regional crisis, which they didn't do. They're not the ones that turned this into what that is. But it says, amid this, the Center on Conscience and War, that's Mike Preisner's group, quoted family members of service members and soldiers where a woman said her husband wants nothing to do with this war and is not alone. So you can hear the conversations saying that there's a lot of people. It's a long thread. I'll just include the thread too. Where down, and again, take it with a grain of salt. Take it with, because it's just him stating these things, right? But he has a group that works with military personnel, and I think he's been proven right about the last one. We have spoken with them, and they're basically just saying that, you know, they want nothing to do with this. They don't believe in the war. So consider that for yourself. And so the question then becomes, is this that unpopular? I do think it is. And then would that then bleed into the military personnel, which maybe that's why they're being removed? Now let's talk about, first of all, the Strait of Hormuz. But first, an interesting point to be made about what Iran is really, you know, what it appears the intention is. Can't know for sure. Only you do is base it on what they say and the follow through, right? Past action, the statements, past actions, and follow through, right? And that's the only thing you could do. And that doesn't necessarily prove that they might not mean or think something else. But if all they ever do is go one direction, regardless of what they say, then it kind of suggests that they don't mean what they say, right? So in this case, the reverse kind of point. You might have seen these Lego videos I've been sharing just because it's obvious that they're meant to influence opinion, and it's coming from Iran, even though most of what they point to is I actually think is completely accurate, but it's done in a way that seems a little bit more like I think it's very important that we don't take sides when it comes to these things, especially as somebody reporting on information. Even if I may argue, like in this case, that what one side is doing is obviously the problem in the dynamic. But the point is that they're funny. It's worth watching, and apparently they're going wildly viral, and it's upsetting them. But it's coming, what I believe is from an Iran-influenced account, which is basically creating these like million-view Lego videos that are making fun of Trump and Netanyahu and really exposing things I think are true. But Joe Rote says, Iran, I've been telling you this my entire career, and he's right. They says, here are 4 pages explaining why we fight the American government, not the American people. And guys, I mean, it is endless. It's sort of like the game of the nuclear conversation where they come out and say, we don't want a nuclear bomb. We never will seek one, and we never have. Now, they don't come out and go, they're lying. Trump and the rest of them simply come out and go, they refuse to get rid of a nuclear bomb. So right there is a disconnect, because you could argue they're lying, and that would probably receive the same. But instead of saying they're lying, they just pretend that they said they won't, which shows you that they have to be dishonest. So in this conversation, guys, over the years, Iran has been very clear. We are fighting the American government, the Israeli government. We're not fighting the peoples. They use the language barrier and tons of other things to misrepresent it. And, you know, the point is saying, like, for example, with Hamas, historically, because Israel in their language overlap says that Israel is the Jews. And so that becomes death to the Jews. They frame it as they hate the Jews. But over the years, Hamas and plenty of others have adjusted their charters and said, look, we mean the Zionists. That's who we're aiming at. And you could call them liars. But historically and going forward, I think you can pretty clearly see that's the case. Same kind of idea here. They've made it clear it's the governments we're aiming at. It's not, you know, my point was they say death to America or whatever, right? The great Satan. Well, that's talking about the actions from the government, not the average John sitting on the corner or Joe sitting on the corner, right? That's not the point. So they have stressed that and recently argued this is the case. We're not fighting you. So he writes Americans. We can't read all that, which is whether the case or not. Most people seem to disregard that they say that. Trump lies about what they mean. And Iran goes, okay, here's AI Lego videos calling your leaders drunk rapists. Americans. Damn, solid point. It's kind of funny. I get what the point is, that it seems both with like Trump, Cambridge Analytica, memes, last election, same thing is that the medium through which some generations and categories of people are influenced seems to be lowbrow, lowest common denominator. And they're realizing that coming out and giving you factual information goes somewhere. I hear it. I think a lot of people do. But at the end of the day, a funny, well put together Lego video that doesn't actually give you facts seems to influence opinion in some cases more than the actual facts. Damn it, that's depressing. But I don't believe it's the majority. The point overall is simply that they're not fighting you, America. They're not fighting American people. I believe that. You don't take my word for it. Look at their actions. Look at the past. Look at what they say. Look at what they do. How they went to the UN and said, hey, we don't want this. They're going to bomb us. We don't want any part of this. And you got to call them the aggressors? Well, we can't be this easy to fool, guys. So here, Brotherhood writes, and this is important to hear, but I think the way he frames it at the end, I think is the problem. He says, Iran literally screams death to America, right? We hear that from everybody. Rubio, death to America, that which means somehow they want to murder your family. It's just not true, at least from what I can prove, in my opinion. If they did even a fraction, Brotherhood says, of what we've done to them in the 20th century alone, we would also be saying death to Iran. Well, that's debatable, but the point is that we would be saying the government that did this is the problem, right? Here's a history lesson. He says, 1951, Iran's democratically elected leader, Mohammad Mossadegh, who was very pro-Western governments, very much loved democracy, had pictures next to the Liberty Bell, told you a million times. And he was unwilling to, and look, even they regarded him this way at the time. He was unwilling to cow to their interests. So they killed him, got rid of him, or rather just removed him and put someone in place that would kill for them. And it says, who wins overwhelmingly and has promised to nationalize Iranian oil. And they don't want that. They want the outsourcing. They want it to go to their people at the expense of Iranians. 53, of course, they overthrow him. 54, U.S. drafts a consortium agreement guaranteeing 50% of Iran's oil profits go to American-friendly corporations for 25 years. That's what we're talking about today, guys. Frankly, Trump just said he's going right back to making it obvious. In the middle part, they pretended like it was for other things and for freedom. Now they're right back to take the oil for money, which is obvious, I think. 57. You can go down the list, guys. The CIA, Mossad trained up a secret police in Iran called the Savak, which was horrifying. And that was the group, this is operated like a KGB, that cracked down on Iranians. If you weren't in the elitist upper circle, an oligarch in Iran, Iranian, and they're like pro-Shah Iran and Western, then you were destitute, guys. And you can ask Grok if you think that makes it make more clear. Or you can just look up the history that shows people lived in absolute squalor. Most everybody in Iran was suffering outside of that upper, and it's very clear. They just lied to you. Surprise, surprise. 60, 78, the Shah, the U.S. request would purchase. You go down the list. The point is they've admitted this isn't even a fraction of it. You can go through the long-term list of them manipulating Iran. The point I wanted to make is even somebody who thinks that Iran's the bad guy, which this guy seems to do, can still stand back and go look at what they've been doing to them their whole lives. Of course they want to fight back. And they didn't even start this fight, guys. But it says, yes, they hate us. I don't agree with that. They hate the government. That was my point to the last post. They know what they're doing to them. They know what the government's doing. And they actually think, look, you don't think they see our content? That's why they post those Lego videos. They're looking at people like us who are going, hey, and I think that most of the world is starting to see that we are not represented by them. But also consider that Iran may want to abuse us just the same way. It's a government. But the facts are what I care about. And it says, yes, they kill troops in the region. Well, not really, though. What are you talking about? What troops are we talking about? You mean after you bombed them and they responded? Because that is the only example I can see outside of the invasion of Iraq where they were killing troops. And the illegal invasion of Iraq based on the live WMDs. Remember that? And Soleimani was the largest effort to fight the actual ISIS elements, and they killed him for it. And it says, yes, they fund proxies that attack Israel. I don't agree with that. They have allies that are all at odds against the illegal occupation, invasion, and torture and suffering and death. The same story. And maybe in that effort to fight back against this horrible long-term thing that they have done their own horrible long-term thing. It doesn't change the fact that what we're talking about is the illegal occupation of Palestine that has spun out of the greater Israel that's causing strife for everybody. Everybody. Now, 24, this Iran supported account simply says, do you know why? Do you know Iran produces over 90 to 97% of its medicines domestically? You know why? Because the United States government's been sanctioning them and swearing it doesn't affect medicine for years. But it does. U.S. sanctions since 1979 have blocked medicines to Iran. They lie about it. You ask them, they lie, but you can easily prove it. But they just lie like every other part of the story. And somehow we just can't seem to see through that. But so Iran has developed its own pharmaceutical research and manufacturing to take care of their people. Maybe not, though. Maybe pharmaceuticals there are just as bad as here. Not the point. It says now the U.S. and Israel, which they are, easily proven, I think even Reuters was reporting on it, are bombing Iran's medical research facilities and pharmaceutical factories. But hashtag freedom and democracy and, fighting the terrorism. Guys, this is terrorism. This is the most obvious representation of terrorism I think I've ever covered in my entire life. The entire thing of this whole agenda. It's objective. It's clear. We're going to get to the statements of Trump, the statements of the rest. They're literally going, we're going to kill you if you don't give us what we want. How is that not terrorism? Threatening to bomb civilian locations like this one. This was April 2nd, on my birthday, actually, that they bombed this bridge. A new video from the moment that a second U.S.-Israeli strike targeted the B-1 bridge, killing 13 civilians. Now, you're going to find some of the people like Jones and the rest reporting it today like it's brand new information. I'm not sure why. It happened on the 2nd. Sean King, as Israel does in Gaza, the U.S. blew up this bridge. Then, and this is important, because they do it everywhere I've ever covered their wars, guys, both the U.S. and Israel. They bombed the bridge, then they paused, then they waited, then they bombed and killed the rescue workers that showed up. This happens every time. It's horrifying. But it's wildly documented. At one point, the human rights, they used to document this. I think they still do, but it doesn't get discussed. They can report they use white phosphorus so they can kill people and just war crimes, bomb a school. Just passes like nothing matters. Because to them, it doesn't, guys. It matters to me, matters to you. But what you need to see is that it does matter to them. Understand that. Doesn't mean you can change it at this moment, but mark that down. Do not miss whether it's Trump or Biden or they don't care. They don't care. Because if they cared, any level of it, any part of Congress, something would be done. Here's the White House into the ridiculousness of their deal making. Now, we've been covering this. And look, it's weird to me how often, just let's say the IMA. Everybody in this group. How often we will discuss something, and I'm not talking about some inside, because there's people out there doing great work today, doing real investigative journalism, where they are breaking down documents and that, because that's, if that happened to come across or somebody gave me something I hadn't seen, or I was out there on the street and I found, I've done that in the past. In some cases, I do my own deeper investigations on certain stories that aren't the same as sort of just grabbing what other, but largely, as I've always pointed out, this show is an aggregation of information. My goal is to present you with an easily digestible kind of view of what seems to be most important. And over the years, that's gotten longer because more seems to be important, in my opinion, and it's happening. But my point in saying all that is that, it's very clear over the years that we'll discuss something that's just in the surface. Everyone's talking about it. And I go, okay, well, here's what we were seeing. Here's what they've done so far. Here's kind of the way I see this is going to go. And in many cases, nobody else making these points. And then it happens. And then, the typical Jones and the rest go, oh my God, the thing and breaking news. And yet nobody seems to go back and go, well, hold on. That's not exactly what Derek Bros was saying was going to happen. Why doesn't that get acknowledged? Why isn't that? Because this system is broken. Now, it doesn't matter at the end of the day, as long as people see it, but that's one of the reasons people don't see it, especially those that need to see it. So in this conversation, we were talking about how right in the beginning, when he started going, well, we're dealing with somebody else from Iran and these fake negotiations, I don't buy it. This feels fake. It doesn't seem like, I didn't know for sure. And still, even right now, maybe tomorrow, it'll turn out that it's somehow magically correct and they were all playing you, because we can be objective about that. But as I said, on March 25th, Trump's claims of an Iranian defector belied by the new U.S. proposals for the Iranian leadership. And day after day after day, it seems to go from we're dealing with them and now you better hurry up or you're all going to die, or some weird, completely it's like the antithesis. You can't say we're having great negotiations and we're right about to make a deal and then a minute later say, we're going to bomb you to the Stone Age if you don't do what we need. Well, if you're over here dealing for the things you need, then why would you state that? Either he's just thinking that's how he negotiates or he's lying about the deal. Now, in some cases, it's both, but I think we need to understand that I think he's wholesale lying to you. Either for market control, which is what a lot of people seem to suggest, that it's about keeping the markets in a certain place so it can benefit his people and his inner circle. Or it's just about the elongation of the agenda for Israel's sake. But either way, they're lying to you about these negotiations. And I think the real point is just desperation. I think he is desperate. I think he's either trapped, not in control, and doesn't know what to do, or is becoming aware that that's the case and doesn't know what to do. So here's what he said yesterday. After what we already saw. I mean, I could go back and tell you in fact, I will point to this breakdown from GD Geopolitics, which is just embarrassing, but we can go through each post and just show you how insanely, what's the right word for it? Incongruent, like just inconsistent. It's just, it's just dishonest, guys. He says, first he posts, remember when I gave Iran 10 days to make a deal or open up the strait, which is right there, coercive. That's not, you're saying, do what I want, or we're going to bomb you. Because what he's not saying, let's discuss a deal that works in your favor. They're going, here's what we demand. Agree to this, or we're going to bomb you. It's not that. No, they're the only ones doing that. Time is running out. 48 hours before all hell will rain down on them. Glory be to God. I mean, this is my point, guys, that you're wrapping in your religious perspective with threats of murder, which is insanely disgusting, not Christian, not any religion, in my opinion. But on top of that, what you're ultimately doing is basic terrorism. You're threatening by force that if you don't give us the thing, we're going to bomb you. Glory to God. Right? I mean, that is textbook terrorism stuff. If this was a Muslim person in a Muslim country saying, we demand this or we will kill you, praise be to Allah, what would you say, Laura Loomer? You damn well know what it was, because I would agree that would be an example of extremism. If acted terrorism, same point here. But you see, the dishonest, ridiculous cartoons like Loomer will not acknowledge that this is way worse than the hypothetical they're framing. Most cases are being played by Mossad or put on MEMRI, just these broken, manipulated points. And that's not to say that there's not extreme Muslims. There obviously are. Many, by the way, are funded and manipulated, who really are extreme, but are being guided to the top by people that Mohammed bin Salman admitted were run by Mossad in Israel, or Israel and the United States. His statement, by the way, that they just lost control, but I hope we're coming to terms with the reality of what these groups have always been. ISIS, Al-Qaeda, these are proxy elements. The very things they're always framing is what Iran is doing, which makes sense when you realize how their entire life they've been projecting what they've been doing around the world. Okay, so this was the fourth. 48 hours. Well, you just bombed their bridge 2 days ago. In the middle of your supposed wait for this to come to pass, didn't you said 10 days, right? So if you go back 2 days ago, you bombed a bridge. Israel's been bombing nonstop, by the way. So what are we even talking about? This is what people are making fun of. So you just decide to pick this back up again and go, you've still got 48 hours. You bombed them, though. So wouldn't that then change this game? It doesn't, because it's all 1 day to the next. And honestly, I do agree. This might just be to get a little pump in the stock market. Just some kind of a financial turn that maybe the prices of oil go down just a little bit. Now, as Adam Cochran points out, he posted this later in the day, Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern time. That was today. Okay, well, wait a minute. Didn't you just say 48 hours yesterday? So now suddenly, wait, now it's Tuesday? Hold on a minute. And so Adam says, when you change the deadline 8 times, the other side no longer worries about the deadline. I mean, it's embarrassing. You think they must know we can see this. So that's why I'm wondering whether this is being, you think Trump's not embarrassed by this, guys? So why did he do it? Truly ask yourself that. Here's the actual post today. What does that mean? Obviously, people are going to take that as meaning his supposed fake ceasefire negotiation, which, don't forget, like I've been telling you, Iran is not even dealing with them. As we said, this one. Iran refuses to meet or deal with the U.S. government. They publicly made this clear. And the people they claim they're talking to either don't exist, or Ghalibaf is speaking up going, we're not talking to you. And even if you think maybe they're dealing with them, then why would Trump have to lie about tankers, which he did? That was proven. There was no 8 to 10 tankers going through. I think he was actually lied to about that from someone of his inner circle in Israel. Either way, it wasn't true. So they're not even meeting with them. Even with Pakistan and Turkey, they're relaying messages and they're going, we don't want at least what they're claiming. And my point was, if you watch the follow through, all you keep getting is Trump extending and lying and floundering. So it seems pretty clear that that's the case. So DD Geopolitics. The Trump timeline. January 18th. Iranian patriots, help is coming. We're moving in. And remember, they were arming them. They were creating this whole thing. 28th of February. We're launching decisive operation. We'll be very fast. That's after, of course, they had agreed to the deal, Iran. And then Israel drove them to attack because they either lied to Trump about an imminent threat or they were all in control anyway. March 2nd, we will win easily. March 3rd, we have won the war. You got to laugh at how stupid that is. He went on saying that for days after that. We won already. It's over. Leave It said we won. They just haven't realized yet. Oh, God. What is that if not desperate, guys? March 7th, we defeated Iran. Right, this was a week later. March 9th, strike Iran. The war is almost over. Clean and decisive. March 12th, we have won, but not completely yet. March 13th, these are all real quotes. We won the war again. March 14th, we need help to open the strait. March 15th, if you don't help, I will remember it. March 16th, we actually don't need help. I was testing loyalty. Now, these are somewhat like part paraphrasing. If NATO doesn't help, consequences will follow. March 17th, we don't need NATO help and don't want it. No Congress approval needed to exit NATO. March 18th, allies must cooperate to open the strait. Okay, March 19th, U.S. allies must step up and help open the strait. March 20th, NATO is cowardly. We may phase this out. March 21st, we don't use the strait. Others need it, not us. March 22nd, final warning. Iran has 48 hours. Iran is finished. March 23rd, one more week. Then we bomb power plants, which would have been crime. March 24th, and they were already, by the way, the war is nearing its end. Oh, you said you won back on March 3rd. March 25th, we are negotiating with Iran. Wasn't true. Very clearly, they lied about that. March 26th, Iran is begging for peace. Also not true. They gave us a gift. Also not true. We delayed power strikes on power plants. What he's trying to do is use circumstances that are already the reality to claim like he drove them to that point. I think it's clear he's trying to find a way out. And he can't just back away because Israel won't probably be happy with that, and that'll make him look weak. And then show that everything he did was a lie. So he is either trying to get Iran to give him something, which I doubt they will at this point, or just doubling down on the bombing. But that's not America first, and it's sure as hell going to kill Americans. Especially since Israel's saying it's not our war anyway. It's only you guys. It's America's war. No joke. As they just said, we're not going to deploy troops. Guess what, guys? We were right yet again. Anybody out there telling you this is the way it was going to go because they paid attention before already knew that Israel would push the U.S. into these wars and then let them fight them for them and let Americans die. And then later claim credit for it, which is what they've done before. March 27th, I and the Ayatollah will jointly manage the Strait of Hormuz. What a clown. Remember, that's the son who right before that, he told you was ineffectual and not really there, maybe dead in a cave. Yeah, who knows? And then, but now we're going to manage it together. March 28th, regime change has occurred in Iran. Well, what he said was, they're not the same regime, so they've changed, right? So technically regime change. That's not even like a clever wordplay, guys. Just so you're telling me if one of them changes their shoes, now it's a regime change? All right. March 29th, negotiations with Iran are going extremely well. Nope. March 30th, we are prepared to destroy Iran's oil, energy, infrastructure, and occupy Karg Island. March 31st, we are ready to end the war without opening the strait. So now all that bluster, now we might just leave without it. April 1st, war ends in 3 days. We'll bomb them for 2 to 3 weeks back to the Stone Age. April 2nd, we destroyed 3 major bridges. Why haven't they called us yet? Sad. Very sad. Now, Saeed Mohammed Marandi points out, due to the attacks by the U.S. and Israeli regimes on certain energy infrastructure, Iran has decided to block all diplomatic communication channels between Iran and the United States. Now, this is already, as far as I could tell, what they were doing, but this is April 4th. And I mean, this is somebody who has far more insight into what they're doing than I would, or anybody else, I would argue. And it says, according to this decision, given Iran's upper hand on the battlefield, which, guys, if we're not acknowledging that by this point, you're not paying attention, in my opinion. If the attacks on Iran escalate in the same manner, communication avenues will remain closed until the U.S. congressional elections, which I guess they would think that it might change then. I don't know why, but at least they're going to, what I think it would show is they probably know nothing will change, but at the very least, they've always been involved in the process. It's not what you could say for the U.S. and Israel, guys. Now, due to the attacks by them on their energy, which are crimes, those are war crimes, they've decided to block all communication. Now, that's not just, that's what I'm trying to say before, is they weren't, sitting down and denying it, which is what Trump keeps saying. We're talking, and they said we're open to it, and we're considering it. No, they're not. They turned you down flatly, and you're just lying about that. And now he's backing this up, simply saying, look, they've shut down any communication channels. They're waiting for the next administration because they've demonstrated they lie about everything. Former Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene discussing what he posted today, which we'll read in a second. She says, on Easter morning, today. This is what President Trump posted. Now, look, if you understand and you know what Trump is and you understand, if you've read what he's written before, the guy is not a Christian, in my opinion. He's not even Republican. He's a fair weather politician, power hungry person, like most people in these fields. The point in saying that is that whether I don't believe he cares about what he does, claims he does, but let's just say you believe he does. Well, that means you think he's a Christian, fighting for the Christian right, Christ is king, and all the stuff you hear from them. And yet then Hegseth, the rest will talk about murdering people and frame it and, God willing. And I don't care if you think they're bad people or not. It's not in the line with your religion to cheer the death of anybody. But yet this is the kind of, and this is that whole weird, just like you have the Zionist manipulation of Judaism, you have the Zionist manipulation of Christianity, and you have these extremist, maniacal, sociopathic Christian Zionists who are really just working for Zionism at its core, who are manipulating people in this country who believe they actually believe the same things they do. They do not. It is a bastardization of everything they're involved in. And what we're talking about here is that Trump on Easter today posts this. Today will be a power plant day. A bridge day, all wrapped in one in Iran. There will be nothing like it. Open the effing strait. That's not the biggest deal in the world, but he cussed on Easter. If you're very strict, that should bother you, especially if the way you frame him as you all do, that should mean something to you. Open the effing strait, you crazy BASTRDs, or you'll be living in hell. In hell? The government or everybody in Iran? There's no way you decouple this because they're the ones telling you they don't even know where they are. So, and on top of that, you said bridges and power plants. You're openly, brazenly telling us you're going to be targeting civilians. And this is on Easter? You praise this? You realize there's tons of Christians in Iran, by the way, despite what the narratives will tell you. And it says, praise be to Allah. That is what he posted. Trying to think if there was, I'm 100% sure he posted that, but I think I have a link in here somewhere. Otherwise, I was going to go grab it real quick. But interesting to think about. Well, I think the point is always just to be, praise to God, praise to Allah, because it's the same thing, by the way, at the end of the day. Different perspective on what the religion is, but the idea is the word means God. But funny, though, is Loomer would probably freak out if Biden said it, but totally won't care when Trump does. But either way, that is not a religious perspective. That is not a man of God. Or a man that believes in God. This is a person, in my opinion, I shouldn't say it like that because people can believe whatever they want and be wrong, but this is a person who does not practice those things. Not like any of them do, guys. Now, everyone in his administration, she writes, this is Marjorie Taylor Greene, somebody who he praised to high heaven until she had her own opinions. And I don't trust her, just to be clear. Everyone in this administration that claims to be a Christian needs to fall on their knees and beg forgiveness from God. And stop worshiping the president and intervene in Trump's madness. I know all of you and him, and he has gone insane. And all of you are complicit. I'm not defending Iran, but let's be honest about all this. And here's what's interesting to me. What I keep talking about, guys, is like these people could have every different opinion. Like they could want every immigrant gone and whatever else, or they want to just send them all to El Salvador. They want to, I'm just trying to think of the most extreme things that average people, left or right, have a problem with. Not illegal immigrants and the legality there, but the way that they're dealing with ICE, the surveillance, all this different stuff. Zionism control over our country under the guise of America First. My point is that we may disagree on everything, the path to it. Disagree on the wedge issue, disagree on immigration, but at the core, this is what I call the Charlie Kirk problem. You have the inner part of this Republican Party, the ones who didn't realize at the very least, who are going, hold on a second. These Christian Zionists are not even on the same path with us. They don't even, but they stand next to us and they scream America first, but then they go out and do those things. They go out and they, that is what Charlie Kirk, I'm convinced, became aware of. The difference between Israel and Zionism, between Judaism and Zionism, and realized that Zionism was the thing influencing Trump to do the things he knew were not America first, not necessarily everybody in Israel. And that, I believe, is what got him killed. In this case, what she's highlighting is the same point. She's addressing directly the people that I think are the higher level people around Trump who are not the Zionists. And she's saying, I'm not defending Iran, but let's be honest about this. She's going, I know you see it, guys. Stop playing this game. The strait is closed. It's not. We'll go over this in a second. It's restricted, yes. One of those things I keep talking about, guys. Everybody everywhere seems to just go with this line, even though it's not true. Like at its core sense of the word, it's not closed. And even if you want to argue one ship, it's still not closed, but it's more than that. We'll go into it next. But still laugh at how everybody seems to just toe the line because there's like a bar that everyone just goes along with. It kills me. Plenty of people, independent media, doing the same thing. The strait is closed because the U.S. and Israel started the unprovoked war against Iran based on the same nuclear lies they've been telling for decades. That any moment Iran would develop a nuclear weapon, you know who has nuclear weapons. Israel. Now think about what she just said right there. Not like some big bombshell that you didn't know, but she's addressing these people as if, look, I know you know this because I agree with her. I know they do. Now, for whatever reason, they've carved this out. They've ignored it. But and this is my opinion, what I believe she's addressing are the people who care about it, but have ignored it because they want to support the team. Kamala was worse and are now starting to become uncomfortably aware of something that was worse than all of it put together. And she's simply going, that is the focal point. They are more than capable of defending themselves without the U.S. having to fight their wars, kill innocent people and children, and pay for it. Trump threatening to bomb power plants and bridges hurts the Iranian people, the very people Trump claimed he was freeing. It's no different. And I know Marjorie knows this, I believe. Every other war you're involved with is the same thing. Every single one of them. On Easter of all days, we as Christians should be reminded that the Son of God died and rose from the grave so that we can be forgiven once and for all of our sins. Jesus commanded us to love one another and forgive one another, even our enemies. You don't just get to pick and choose, guys. That's how you play this when you do the same thing in reverse. Selectively pick out one thing and go, they're all monsters, when you could do the same thing back. There's so much dishonesty today. She goes on, our president is not a Christian. Let me repeat that. She says, our president is not a Christian. I said the same thing. I've said that from the beginning. And his words and actions should not be supported by Christians. Christians in the administration should be pursuing peace, urging the president to make peace, not escalating war that is hurting people. This is not what we promised the American people when they overwhelmingly voted in 2024. I disagree in the reality of how our process even works, but that's not going to get into it now. I know, she says, I was there more than most. This is not making America great again. This is evil. Now, maybe she's seeing it. I hope so. And I will stand by the statements and hope that whether she runs or not, which will make me feel she's not honest, I'll still hope that she is just thinking that's the path, but I'll question everything they do, like any of them. Question everything, consider all possibilities. It's very simple. But on top of it, though, don't you think she should have seen this before? Like anybody else? It was there, guys. It was obvious from the very beginning. Why was she suddenly cheering this on? Why was she saying rah, rah, Israel until suddenly she turned? I don't know. Maybe she was, at the very least, consider that she was lying to you before because she felt like that was in her interest or whatever, and for whatever reason, changed tune. I don't care what it is, as long as the information's getting out and people are looking at the truth, but question whether their intentions are wrong. Now, here's what he's saying today. Trump says he can get a deal with Iran by Monday or blow everything up. Why are we just collectively laughing at this person right now? Which I kind of think that's where we are. What do you mean make a deal? So you just said you are. You said 30 seconds ago that they already made a deal. Didn't you just say they gave you wet boats full of oil? They didn't, by the way. But make a deal with Iran by Monday. But wait, you just posted Tuesday at 8 p.m. This person is worthy of ridicule. Very much so. The Kobesi letter writes, breaking, Iran Speaker of the Parliament responds to President Trump's statement saying that we're making a deal. Can you guess what they said? Quote, your reckless moves are dragging the United States into a living hell for every single family, and our whole region is going to burn because you insist on following Netanyahu's commands. The only real solution is respecting the rights of the Iranian people and ending this dangerous game. Read in the other article. So Trump comes out and says, we're making a deal with them. Or we're going to kill you, whichever way it goes. So stupid. And they simply go, you're being reckless. We're not talking to you. As Morandi pointed out, we're not even in communication with you right now, at least as the information shows. So what do you think this means? Like just in this one point, why would he do that? I mean, clearly that's not a point of power. You're not in some kind of like negotiating powerful position if you have to just make things up. Okay, just for the sake of conversation, maybe they are, and they're completely dominating it, but Trump is playing with the narratives to manipulate financially to gain people extra money until they do what they're going to do. Would still be disgusting because that means they're drawing it out to gain while people die. But I mean, there's really no way you can look at this without thinking that there's something amiss. I think it's, Occam's razor. It's simple. I think he's lying to you. And I think it's because they are losing, as I think the evidence shows. So on the point of the oil, before we get into the other parts, because this seems to be one of the focal points for everybody, for him included, Glenn Deason says, at least saying the quiet part out loud, stealing the oil, is more honest than his predecessor's claim of waging wars to liberate the oppressed. I agree. That's the one thing we've always pointed out is that, and I don't think it's because I don't think Trump's doing it to benefit you, but we've always pointed out that at the very least, Trump takes the mask off. We're there to take the oil, right? Take the oil, whatever. We should have taken the oil. He pulls it off. And then he clumsily says things that expose things that he shouldn't say. But as he said on was it 2 days ago? Keep the oil, anyone? As he's pretending that we're fighting for Iranians, which that's theirs, and it's just silly. Then he says, with a little more time, we can easily open the Hormuz Strait, take the oil, make a fortune. It would be a gusher for the world. Yeah, clearly the world will benefit as it goes into your insider pockets. But I agree. But realize this is he's brazenly showing you what they're going to do, at least what he wants to do. Or it could be a play, a head fake. But either way, he's telling you something that is a crime. That's not how this is supposed to go. Even though they've done it before and they always have, it's still a crime. It was a crime then. He's just screaming it. So, of course, here's what you get from the Trump supporters. We talked about the straight toll conversation. And what did we tell you? Watch. And we were shown to be correct yet again, because I wasn't psychic. It's because I just know how these people respond. The point, if you remember, was that the straight discussion is very clear. The plan, I think almost every single other location does already have a toll. Whether it's a canal or a strait, Panama, they charge sometimes millions of dollars per ship. That's been the public reality for a really long time. You know what location does never done that? Strait of Hormuz, Iran. No, you could argue it's because they haven't completely been legitimately that the international community has not regarded them as in control of it, even though everyone knows they've been strategically in control of it this entire time, which is why they were always worried about what would happen. It's very clear. So the point was they just haven't done it anyway, even though they could have. And now, because of the illegal war that they started, they're now claiming they're going to initiate that process. So even if you can't turn around and go, terrorism, extortion, when you drove them to do something they've never done before because of your illegal actions. But I told you they would go that route because that's what they do. That's how desperate they are. Terrorism. But one step further, and this just takes the cake. I almost am willing to argue that I think, let's put it this way. We should consider whether this might have been the plan. But Iran never took the bait, which is they never shut down the strait, which we're going to get into next. Yet again, the reality of what it actually is and whether it's actually shut down, which it is restricted, but it is clearly open. But the game from day one, which is I'm convinced was the plan, or at the very least that Israel convinced Trump would be the way it went, is that they'll bomb everybody because they're crazy terrorists, and they'll put mines in the strait and they'll bomb everybody and shut it down. They did not. At all. Now, there are reports, well, actually, I'll get into it in a second before I play this clip, of tankers and so on, but Israel and the United States have been the ones that were really hitting the oil tankers. The ones they have attacked, even around or near or going through, have been literally, as you can prove for yourself, Israel connected, the U.S. connected, or anybody involved with the war against them. That's not shut down. That is anybody bombing us, we're going to keep from going to the pass. Everybody else can. Now, whether they agree, take their word at that, whether they decide to chance it or not, totally different story. I'm of the mind that Israel and the United States have been shoving fear in everyone's faces, saying these terrorist Iranians are going to kill you if you go through the strait, when that's not the case, because they wanted that to be the case. They wanted it shut down so they could turn the world against Iran, and Iran's not stupid enough to take the bait. That's what it looks like to me. So coming back to the point, this shameless MAGA supporting account is supporting Fox News. I forget his name. I think it's on the clip, saying that, well, here's what we should do. Trump, instead of allowing Iran to extort you for something that every other strait in the world does, will charge you $2 million to escort you through the strait. But even though that won't happen because nobody else wants to be involved in that, but guys, this is straight up, Not only have you created it, you're now in your what do we call it, like preemptive extortion, right? Like we're going to do it first because they're going to do it. God, we truly live in a cartoon.
Or quite frankly, what President Trump ought to do is he ought to have announce that he's going to have a Hormuz transit tariff, and that instead of Iran charging $2 million a vessel going through the Strait of Hormuz,
which will only be $2 million in extreme circumstances of large ships carrying lots of oil, if that, by the way. But that's become the narrative now. $2 million per ship is not really what it will be based on everything else I've seen and any other strait we're talking about, because they want it to be some kind of extortion from terrorists. That's not what's happening. They're even right now in discussions about including other countries around them to manage it. But they always have to go full terrorist or full R, like just these people are the most crazy maniacal monsters of all time. And it's just not true. Even maybe they're bad. I don't agree with most of what they're saying, but to go all the way over just makes it stupid. So to them, they're going to take money from everybody and steal from your ships. And I've seen this all day on stuff. If they were going to do that, then why would they go to the UN? Why would they formalize an agreement? Why would they talk with their allies to manage it? Because you guys would do that.
Hormuz, the United States is going to charge a $2 million escort fee for every vessel going through the Strait of Hormuz, which is about $9 billion a month, $100 billion a year in revenue coming in, and we will waive that fee for any country that participates in the coalition.
Now, here's what I think, too, is that I think Donald Trump recognized this money-making opportunity. And see, that's why we'll manage the strait together. Where do you think that was coming from? This. And so this is floated out as the idea that, well, even if they won't let that happen, because they're probably back there shoving that idea in their face, going, look, we'll stop bombing you. Let us manage the strait. They're going, hell no. And so this gets floated as we'll take it anyway. We'll just spin it around and make it look like we're saving you while we extort money from every ship that goes to the... It's just narrative. That's all it is. It's just narrative. At the end of the day, the U.S. will demand money for you to go to the strait and say it's Iran's fault if it happens.
Open up the Strait of Hormuz. That will open it up, and reward the good guys who are helping us and punish those who decide to stay on the sidelines.
Punish those who just don't stand up and do what we want. But they're the good guys. Iran's going, we're not going to do it anybody. Anyway, I'm not going to speak for it because who knows that they're going to end up doing. But it's just always so cartoonish to me how clearly, like, where are the adults in the room? Where are all the people that are going to go, well, that's just stupid. Like, that's objectively that you're doing what you just said they were going to do before they even do it. And then you should go, well, were they even going to do it? It's a good question. So again, I think I'm going to I don't need to stress it, I think, for the audience that's always here. You guys have heard me talk about this from the beginning, but in case the new people to the show, which we are growing every day despite what people show, is that this has always been open. From the very big moment this started, Iran was stating on interviews and otherwise that we're fighting the Zionists. It's U.S. and Israel and people that are supporting the co-belligerents and the illegal war against us that we told the UN in February 11th was going to happen, and they're going to do it. It's illegal, and we're just going to defend ourselves on the record. So when this started, like I said, I'm of the mind that the U.S. and Israel tried to force in the artificial narrative that they had shut the strait down. And still to this very day, lockstep media, the strait's been shut down for the most part. Obviously mainstream alternative. But on top of that, using the sentiment to then motivate other arguments. Well, now the war is about opening the strait. Well, you caused that by starting the illegal war. Now the war focus is to open the thing that's not really closed, but that you effectively closed or, restricted. It's just silly. So overall, they have been restricted. And I'm of the mind it's largely because of the U.S. and Israel sort of stressing that it is closed when it's not and causing more fear. But as I've shown you over the last so many shows, they've been Spain and plenty of people. I mean, even last show, I don't think I included it this time. I went over the list. I mean, tons of countries. There's like at least 8 or 9 countries that have been allowed and are continuing to go through. Now, that doesn't amount to tons of them because I do, again, think there are efforts to stop that. But Israel and the United States arguing it shut down and arguing they're going to step in and control it is about that. It's about control. And that what we have are evidence points showing you that it has been increased. So whether you think it's been simple point on the closed aspect, you have now reports coming out showing you that it has continued to go up since they basically restricted it because of what the U.S. government did. But also from tankertrackers.com, 108 tankers have departed the Strait of Hormuz since March 1st about 3 per day, according to tanker trackers using satellite imagery, which also was the reason they could prove that Trump lied about those tankers, 10 of oil tankers going through. The count includes some dark fleet vessels and switch-offs, transponders, but may still underestimate the total traffic. So that's not closed. Oil is still flowing through there in some degree, and I argue would be going a hell of a lot more if they weren't acting like this was something that was nefarious, right? And you go through and look for yourself. Spain, what was it? God, forgetting off the top of my head. I don't want to miscite them, but it was like 7 or 8 countries that they reported were being allowed to go through. And so here's what even Grok had to say. Not that it should matter more than your own investigation. In fact, it shouldn't. But for those that are partisan, who somehow think that the information's tainted if it doesn't come from people you agree with, no, the Strait of Hormuz is not fully closed. It's effectively restricted and mostly blocked as of April 5th. Now, you could argue it's mostly blocked, but by Iran, I disagree with. But here's what it says down here. Vessels associated with the U.S. and Israel are the ones that are restricted. Or countries seen as supporting the attacks on Iran are blocked or threatened. That's it. Right? The rest of it simply comes from them claiming that they're under threat. And as I've shown you, clearly traffic has continued through. Tankers are the main restricted point. Now here's Iran. Dropsite News reporting officially declared that Iraq has been exempt from transit restrictions. But see, if you understand the way this has started, they came out in the beginning and said the only groups that we are dealing with are the ones fighting us. So that very clearly did not include Iraq. When we're talking about the U.S. government doing it through that, the PMU has been supportive of their resistance against the United States, which is not technically the same. But the point would be, this is them just trying, like publicly going, look, you're good. My opinion. And it says on February 2026, Iraq's total crude production was approximately 4.19 million barrels per day, about 4% of the total global production. It plunged to roughly 800,000 as storage tanks filled up due to the inability to export through the strait. Oman, this is from Al Jazeera, Iran discusses smooth transit in Strait of Hormuz. So now what we're seeing is Trump's over here screaming about how everyone's dealing with him, when it's pretty clear that nobody is. What's happening around it all is Oman, foreign minister, somebody who was very aware that they lied about what they were trying to do, has been now going and trying to deal with, and this is Muscat as well, discussing them dealing with Iran around the United States. And this is what I think is going to happen. Is they're going to find some kind of an accommodation, which won't include them, is the U.S. and Israel. But what the U.S. is, Trump in particular, mark my words, my opinion, I'm guessing, but I believe he's probably going to say, I did that, right? That they made a deal and now things are going back to normal and it's because of my deal with Iran. I think that's what he was trying to do in the beginning. And Iran just wouldn't give him an inch because they know what they're going to do. Israel's not going to stop bombing them either way. So why would they give Trump anything? Why would they allow him to not look like the fool that he clearly is playing? Oman and Iran have held deputy foreign minister level talks discussing options to ensure the smooth transit of vessels through the Strait of Hormuz. Now imagine, should they truly make this go to a point where everybody other than them is able to functionally go through? That would be really damaging for the U.S. and Israel right now. I think that's what they're desperate to have happen. They want to stop that from happening. And the point is that they've been very successful in bombing, basically protecting the area in regard to military elements. They know this. They've reported it from the beginning. And I mean, talking about going back before this moment, that they have the location to just basically go after anything they don't want to go through the strait. And that's why they talked about the idea of the military transit. Nobody was okay with that. And that, even though, by the way, as I told you, all the Nick Sorters of the world came out and said, everybody's involved and we're all winning. And it didn't happen because I guess Trump lied about it and they just repeated it like they always do. As of right now, it seems none of them are open for the idea of the militarized transit, but they are trying to find another way around this. Janice Girl, Qatar and Oman strike deal with Iran. This was as of 8 hours ago. Several sources are reporting Qatar and Oman have struck deals with Iran, and Qatar has begun U.S. troop withdrawal and U.S. bases in its countries. Now, a lot of this is up in the air, but it's interesting. Here's what the foreign minister of Oman wrote. The Sultanate of Oman and the Islamic Republic of Iran held a meeting on Saturday the 4th at the level of deputy ministers in the foreign ministries of the two countries, attended by specialties from both sides. The meeting discussed possible options for ensuring the smooth flow of transit through the Strait of Hormuz amid the circumstances currently prevailing in the region. During the meeting, experts from both sides presented a number of visions. You know how much that irritates Trump? I guarantee it. That they're not even dealing with him. He's just out of the picture at this point. And it also very clearly shows that he's not involved. If they're having entire meetings about the future of the Strait that he's not involved in. I guarantee that bothers him. World leaders bypassed Trump to tackle Strait of Hormuz crisis. This is also on the 4th. Countries have, it's right here. Countries heavily reliant on energy exports from the Strait of Hormuz are troubleshooting plans to reopen the critical maritime trade route amid the chaos and uncertainty around the U.S.-Israel war against Iran. The United Kingdom convened 41 countries on Thursday to discuss plans to reopen the strait, pinning the blame on Iran, of course, for holding the global economy hostage, which, if you dig in, doesn't even seem what the real opinion is. But, of course, they don't want to irritate Trump. So you just lie about somehow them holding the world hostage by hijacking the shipping route. You mean the route that they was open before they illegally bombed them and that everyone in the world knew they might do should you illegally bomb them? But yes, it's their illegal terrorism. This is how stupid it all is. It should be laughed at because that's insane. And they know you know that. While the president was not publicly addressed at the meeting, allies are deeply frustrated with Trump. Even Emmanuel Macron, believe it or not, has taken a hard line against the United States' war against Iran, rejecting Trump's pleas to European nations to join the offensive operations to open the strait. Now, this guy is a global player, clearly global. I mean, Macron is part of the problem. I just simply think that everyone can see that this is going awry. Now, I do think there's a kind of schism between like the greater Israel extremist version of parts of that with just the larger global technocratic vision. I think there's a break there. But either way, at the end of the day, I believe Macron supports a lot of the larger agendas, but I think he sees the problems. I don't think he cares. I think it's about the fact that what Trump is doing is too obvious. So they have to come out and do that. All my opinion. And it says, quote, they cannot then complain about not being supported in an operation they decided on their own. It's not an operation, Macron said. Macron was responding to a question about Trump's announcement on April 1st that he was preparing for major strikes against Iran. In the middle of what he claimed was a 10-day break, I guess. The U.S. president because he bombed him on the 2nd, remember. The U.S. president on Thursday said the U.S. has Iran's bridges and electricity plants on their target list. I mean, you just can't overstress that. There is no world in which that's okay. They're just telling you we're going to break the law. And they do Israel's doing it right now in Lebanon. Israel's doing it right now in Tehran. Trump has lashed out against European nations who have rebuffed this request for assistance, ranging from the petty, taking personal jabs at Macron's marriage, to the existential, threatening to withdraw U.S. forces from NATO. That's what's worth laughing about, as you got the Eric Howardys out there telling you that everybody supported him. Everyone's on board for his military agenda, because it wasn't true. European leaders and other nations reliant on energy exports from the Gulf are confronting the reality that they must develop action plans in the face of uncertainty around how long the Iran war could continue and what Trump's exit strategy might look like. Trump has given wildly contradictory statements over the past few days on the Strait of Hormuz. On Friday, Trump said that with more time, the U.S. could open the strait, take the oil, make a fortune. Iran has succeeded in effectively closing the strait by carrying out missile and drone attacks on some ships, threatening further attacks and potentially mining the waterway, which there's no evidence for. They've done it before. Trump cryptically said if they ever do it, hasn't happened yet, we'll be mad. And then that day they reported mines, and it's never been brought up since. There's ships going through the it's just not true. I don't know how that could be true. At the end of the day, they could, and they have. But there's just no evidence. If they were going to close down the strait, then yes. Had they actually closed it, then mines would make sense. But they did not. This is all a big show. This is like a psyop on top of a psyop here. And the point, though, is that they have, in fact, done this. Now, this is what I want to show you, is that the evidence you can find about the ones that they claim they did hit, at the very least, Iran is telling you that it's ships that they believe were associated with the war, which, in fact, would make that a military target in the minds of everybody attacking them. But either way, it's important for you guys to hear that what we're talking about is them only going after ships, according to them, they could be lying, that they claim are attacking them, which would mean every other one should be allowed and will continue to go through. So they didn't effectively close the strait by doing what they're claiming the way they're claiming it. And it says, and Iran is strengthening its control over the waterway, demanding as part of any ceasefire deal to be recognized as the sovereign authority over the passage, like every other location. Its parliament on Thursday approved a plan to collect tolls on vessels traveling through the strait. Of course, because, terrorists typically go through their parliament to pass some kind of legislation to initiate the extortion plan, right? And it says, although it said it would require approval from the neighboring states. Right, again, same point, right? Because typically, if you're going to extort everyone around you, you make sure everyone's on board with the agreement. It's because they're trying to go about this a way that makes it like every other location that does this. And all they can do is go terrorism. Starting prices for oil tankers can be, as it writes, according to this mainstream platform, and I do believe this is somewhat customary, but I haven't seen evidence that's what Iran's planning, can be $1 per barrel with some tankers up to 2 million barrels. And so that just becomes 2 million for ship across every Fox News report. Typical. And payments made by Chinese yuan or cryptocurrency, Bloomberg reported. This includes diplomatic pressure on Iran to permit free passage through the strait and explore the options of sanctions to punish Iran if it keeps the strait closed. This is their options of what they need to do, like pressuring them to keep the strait open. So basically pressure them to not charge a fee like everybody else does. Because if they did, they'd be the unique bad guy, even though everybody else does it. Got it. So the only reason it's restricted is due to Israeli-U.S. actions. I already pointed that out, but important to think about that. They're making this huge, big case about why we have to keep it open. Well, it wouldn't be closed right now if you guys didn't start the war. Simple enough, right? U.S. influence in the Gulf fades as Qatar and Oman strike deals with Tehran. This is the other thing that Gen X Girl is pointing to. This is on the 3rd. The U.S. influence in the Gulf is fading as the war goes into its 5th week with no sign of ending. And regional players are starting to cut deals with Tehran to end the attacks on their territories because most of them have been shown to be continuing in some way to support the U.S., which then they told you, if you continue to do that, you're going to continue to be a target, which makes them actual legal military targets. 5 weeks. Well, actually, technically, it would be, I think it's technically 35 days from the 28th forward. But, 12-day war, the long-term game they've been playing against Iran. The point, though, is that everyone's getting frustrated. You told us it was going to be a couple weeks. You told us you'd keep us safe. And they did not. That's your fault for trusting the U.S. government. This lied to everybody my entire life. Oman and Qatar are both reportedly cutting deals in the last week, reportedly, that will take them off Iran's target list. Qatar reportedly offered to return Iranian cash deposited in its banks. Of course, they'll scream they're funding terrorism, even though it's money that was theirs, just like with Obama. But it says now Tehran is reportedly offering to share control of the Strait of Hormuz with Muscat in a deal that would represent a major strategic defeat for Trump's administration. So they're asking their neighbors to be involved and allow this, and they're trying to work with another location to actually manage the control. I don't know what world that would ever be called terrorism. And it says the Gulf states are increasingly angry at the Trump administration, which was supposed to be a guarantor of their security, but instead unleashed the biggest war in the Middle East for decades without consulting them and without taking their interest into account. And of course, then blindly defended Israel and let them be bombed, even though they promised to actually help defend them against these missiles. And it says, initially, Trump promised to open the Strait of Hormuz with naval escorts through the narrow waterway. But after a month, it's become patently clear that the U.S. Navy is defenseless against Iranian missiles and drones that line the shores of the passageway. So this is why the UK and the rest were like, we're not going to do that. We're being sitting ducks. And then everybody lied about it. The White House has openly criticized Tel Aviv for its overly destructive attacks. Interesting. What's telling to that is that you don't really hear that, even though there is an element of that, because they're not supposed to be at odds. Openly, in cases where it's useful for them to say, well, you guys are a little too aggressive, and question Trump's control over the whole agenda. Who appears to have a separate agenda, Israel, and intends to see Iran's economy permanently weakened or wrecked. The U.S. President Donald Trump runs out of ideas. As he does, he has flip-flopped between threatening to bomb Iran in the Stone Ages to simply pulling out and leaving the regional powers and Asia to clean up the mess. The Gulf states are starting to take matters into their own hands. Now it says Qatar is amongst the Gulf states considering kicking the U.S. military out of their country. Doha is home to CENTCOM, the U.S. military headquarters in the region, and the Al Udeid air base that has come under heavy bombardment by Iran. In fact, they took out that $1.1 billion installation. The U.S., this is important, and it is very widely reported. We even have satellite imagery and so on, the U.S. has a total of 13 military bases in the region, right? But totally, they're the ones being attacked, right? And in a surprise result, all of them were largely destroyed or badly damaged in the first week of hostilities, underscoring the U.S.'s inability to protect either its own military installations or those that it hosts in other countries. And realize that this is important for many reasons. One, there's plenty of reports coming out, and I already, with things like Maxar and the CIA connection, like I've always known this is part, but it's becoming very clear that they have put out like a blanket effort to just block any kind of, like Israel always. I found out that recently, which blows my mind, that just there's like this standing deal with most of these GPS groups, just blanket fuzz out Israel. The only group that works for. But the rest of it, they're just making this kind of current reality that like, don't show what's going on in our base, don't show what Iran's doing. Like this very broad effort to just lie about people being killed because U.S. people are being killed and they're lying to you about it, which shows you how little they value them, how little they care about them, but also all the different things that are all the billions of dollars being wasted because they can't defend you. And we knew that. But Riyadh's relations with the White House, one of their chief allies in the area, took a nosedive on April 1st after the kingdom signed a defense pact with Ukraine for the supply of drones without consulting the White House. Trump was not pleased and said the NBS could kiss his ASS. MBS was not pleased and counted that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia would no longer purchase U.S.-made weapons. I kind of doubt that, but that's a huge shift. Quote, "We will no longer buy American weapons." Okay, this is truly starting to feel like the complete dismantling of this country. You know who I think is doing that? Until now, the money that flowed into the United States military-industrial complex was not merely a matter of trade, as Mohammed bin Salman writes, but in reality was a ritual of allegiance. It was not simply about purchasing missile systems, but about buying the right to belong. From today, that is over. Wow, guys. Okay, you could really read into this. We'll have to see how it goes forward. But to me, this is the dying of an empire. This is the dying of an age. And it's not even like a positive shift to something else. I mean, right now, what we're talking about is Saudi Arabia going, look, we've been paying our way into this. Well, why do you think they've never been criticized for their crazy actions or for their extremism, the Sunni connection to everything they say they're fighting? But Saudi Arabia's okay. They can crucify people in the town square and whip people in the middle of it's not a joke. But, but it's okay because, we buy things. You just basically always has been the reality. This government has been sold out to the highest bidder. Give us some billions of dollars and we'll ignore your terrorism. In fact, we'll pretend everybody else is terrorists who you don't like. That is over. U.S. intelligence warns Iran is unlikely to ease Strait of Hormuz chokehold. Yet again, ladies and gentlemen, the U.S. government ignores its own intelligence. And who do you think it's listening to? U.S. intelligence, just like they told them they weren't seeking a nuclear missile, as Gabbard told them, and they ignored it too, and just like they said, should you take out Khamenei, it probably won't change anything. That's public. Trump listened to Israel. You can't even deny this at this point. Now, yet again, they knew this would happen because it was always the plan. Anybody who barely paid attention knew this was the potential action Iran would take, which is why they've been fighting to control the Bab el-Mandeb Strait and executing people in Yemen for decades because they wanted, still failed. But they told him, Iran is unlikely to let this pass. And Trump did it anyway. And Trump continues to push because he's not being guided by intelligence or American interests. On the 5th today, Trump warns Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz by Tuesday or face hell. So here's what's funny to me. You literally have Iran who says this, right? So you have Iran who comes out on the 4th and says, Iran warns Trump, entire region will become hell for you, as we just read, right? If U.S. attacks escalate, which is what it's been the entire time. U.S. and Israel escalating. And it's as they're searching for the airmen we'll get to real quickly here. Let me see how long we are. Not bad. So then Trump, because I guess he's just a child, comes in the next day and goes, you better do what I want or it'll be hell. You can't even think of a better word to use. Like you just throw back at you're the one. I know you are. What am I? Is it about the element that we're at right now? Because it's not hard to see the timeline. I guess Trump has to be the one. It's always the one threatening and in control because he's the weakest person in the room, it seems. Please do not take that as somehow left versus right. I think they're all ridiculous. But there is a special kind of like bombacity to this person. He's very juvenile and very, very petty when it comes to the smallest of things, which you could argue that you should put, that if you cared about American interests, then these things would not be your most important objective. That you would put aside your small things and fight for our interests. That's not what our governments do. But yes, you're the one. You'll face hell if you don't do what I want. Well, no one's even listening to him. But here, Iran came out the day before and told him this. If you keep escalating, and clearly they don't care, this will be bad. Now, of course, what that turns into is oh wait, hold on. Did I skip the timing? Oh, well, either way, I might have closed it on accident. This gets turned into Iran's threatening hell on earth for Americans. It's not what they're saying. But of course, that's the broken nature of our system and the fact that they have to lie about basic statements because that means they're not saying the things they always say they're saying. He's talking about the entire region. So the Middle East, in fact, where they are, will become hell for you, Trump, if you keep doing this. And then you got ridiculous Fox News people telling you Iran threatened Americans today, saying they'll turn us into hell. It's sad. It's sad, guys. Yesterday, Israel preparing for attacks on Iran energy sites. Crimes, right? But look what they say. Awaits U.S. green light. Guys, we are being played in a spectacular way right now. Like this. So if you haven't caught on by now, they're failing. They're failing. Iran has demonstrated this every single day without fail that they are able to continue to get through. They have not drawn them well. They spent themselves out, and in fact, the reverse with their interceptors seems to be the case. And they are spinning out. I mean, I've hesitated by getting into it because I can't verify all of those points. That's what I think is happening, but I feel like I've seen that from the very early parts of this. And even pro-U.S. people are simply going, yes, that seems to be the reality on the ground. So in the midst of this utterly floundering agenda that Israel has always driven the U.S. into, what do we get? What did we just hear? Oh, is it right here? I'll play it again and we'll come back to it in a second. Well, we get that. It's America's war. It's not our war. We don't want anything to do with this, even though that's exactly what you said at the beginning. And I've been doing this for 40 years. Netanyahu proudly says, we finally did it. And then now it's not even ours. It's America's war. On top of that, they haven't waited for a green light from the U.S. in any circumstance, really almost ever. What happened about a month and a half ago? Or no, it would have been a little less than a month ago. Donald Trump, or rather the U.S. government, took certain action. Israel, and this was covered by multiple mainstream platforms, Israel spoke up and said, hey, what are you doing? And they responded by going, okay, we'll wait. Basically, I forget the exact phrasing, but basically said, we will wait for your guidance. Israel chastised them for taking action without their involvement. And now we're to believe that they're coming around and going, we're waiting for you. You're in control. It's completely your thing. I'm stepping outside. I'll leave the room. Like, it's okay. It's like Homer Simpson going to the bushes. You're like, wait a minute. You started this. This is always the plan, guys. It's just that we're just following their lead. Trump's the one. It's all Trump. Sort of like Trump does to Rubio. You see how this trickles downhill? Tuesday will be power plant day, bridge day, wrapped in one. I already read it for you. There will be nothing like it. Open the effing strait, you crazy. It's just insane. Now, something about this makes me, even the signing of President Donald J. Trump, that doesn't seem how he usually signs it. I mean, I feel like there's all these different conversations going around about whether he's missing or whatever. Hey, maybe. I don't know. And frankly, if it comes to pass, we'll talk about it. Just like Alex Jones and all the rest were waxing intellectual for weeks about how Netanyahu was dead. Who knows? Maybe. But there's nothing you can use to prove that right now. So what's the point of, they like to spin you out in these hypotheticals, get you missing the forest for the trees because that's their job, it seems. But it's certainly possible. It wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't be surprising if Israel took out Trump at this point. Well, at the end of the day, it's about what the agenda is, and we should wonder whether something's going on. I'm only saying that because I found that strange, but he's telling you we're going to commit war crimes. Today, Spectator Index, Israeli defense minister says that as long as Iranian missile fire continues, Iran will see its national infrastructure erode and collapse. I mean, you're not even trying to pretend anymore that that's somehow connected to terrorism. You're not saying they're using tunnels or human shields. You're just going, we're going to destroy every civilian thing if you just keep bombing. Meaning, if you just keep engaging legally with this war, using your missiles as we use our missiles, we're going to target your person. Yes. I mean, I don't know what it is, but they're just being public about it now. We're terrorists, and we will bomb your civilian locations if you even put up a fight. And Iran's the terrorist in this situation? I mean, come on, guys. Literally, Trump says, quote, today, we're blowing up the whole country if no Iran deal in 48 hours. The whole country, direct quote, whole country. These people are terrorists. Wall Street Journal. Officials say hitting power plants and roadways is necessary to cripple their weapons programs. And now this is what's so crazy. You now have people like the Wall Street Journal, platforms like the Wall Street Journal coming around and doing their job for them, which guess what, guys? Our whole career, we've been showing you that. It's one major thing. Now, that doesn't mean every person and every editor and but you can see the way this goes. How in the world are you going to try to do their job? They're not even claiming that. You're going to come out and tell us that now they're using them for weapons. That doesn't make it legal targets. By that logic, every road anywhere is a legal target because they could have used it to drive their cars that have missiles in them. Insane. Belligerence. And as Ben says, first the U.S. claimed it could easily overthrow Iran's government by assassinating top leaders. That failed. Then the U.S. bombed Iran's military sites. That failed. So now the U.S. empire wants to destroy all of their civilian infrastructure. This is state terrorism. I don't know how you could deny that. Because you understand, guys, it's not like they're saying one thing and I'm going like, wink, wink, that's what they mean. They're saying the thing that should be acknowledged as a crime. Trita Parsi points out that Tehran says that it has daily sent military intelligence to the GCC countries, as well as to the UN Secretary General, showing that these specific GCC territories are being used for strikes in Iran, Kuwait, and so on. It says now an investigation by France 24 concludes that, quote, on at least 2 occasions, on March 24th and 31st, U.S. missiles were launched from HIMARS launchers inside territory of Kuwait. So this is just going back around to showing you that these locations, whether because they're not in control of their own countries or not, are still allowing U.S. missiles that are continuing to illegally bomb Iran. So that makes these countries still legal targets. And it says whether Kuwait has allowed the territory to be used after Iran stated striking it or not, or if it does, or if it is done altogether without permission, remains unclear. Won't change the fact that they argue they have a legal right to bomb it. Now, in regard to bombings, a French journalist in Iran confirms what many others have already confirmed, that Israel and Trump have bombed 8 pharmaceutical factories, including a cancer medication facility, 60 pharmacies, multiple hospitals, multiple schools, one of the oldest medical research institutions in the region. These aren't military targets, obviously. It's reported on what this platform is down here. I can't see it, but this has been, again, this is what's so frustrating. You'll get the Zionists down here. They go fake news and, whatever, Bollywood. They are publicly saying they're aiming for these locations. And yet then you dispute that they're bombing them when Trump goes, I'm going to bomb that? That seems pretty stupid. It shows you how broken it is, how desperate it is, that they're flailing, guys. We all see it. More Epstein coalition war crimes, they write. U.S.-Israeli strikes hit the Laser and Plasma Research Institute and a girls' dormitory at Beheshti University in Tehran. This was on the 3rd. It never stops. As Daniel McAdams writes, Iran shoots down planes. The U.S. shoots little girls. Might as well make that the mantra for every war they've ever been involved in. It's what they do. Here's Arsen Atrovsky. How long have we called this guy out? He says on the 4th, as you're going about your day, hundreds of thousands of Israelis are racing to bomb shelters after Iran just fired a barrage of missiles, including Tel Aviv. And as Glenn rightly points out, the way Israelis keep talking as if Iran just randomly decided to victimize them with missiles, due to anti-Semitism, of course, is almost impressive in its sociopathic delusion. Israelis really believe that they have the divine right to bomb and exterminate anyone with no retaliation. It's crazy. This guy's supposedly a human rights lawyer. Is or not, he's not. By definition of what he does. Now, Argachi, from Foreign Minister of Iran, says, remember the Western outrage about hostilities near Zaporozhye power plant? the nuclear power plant. We talked about it. Israel and the U.S. have bombed our Bushehr plant 4 times now. I actually believe that they're trying to create a problem. And Iran is effectively, or maybe they're just getting lucky, or maybe they've insulated it somehow. I believe this was the point. I believe that was the point in Ukraine. Radioactive fallout will end life in the GCC capitals, not Tehran. Right? Like Kuwait. We just talked that this is they're trying to create this, and they want to blame Iran. My opinion. Attacks on our petrochemicals also convey real objectives. At the very least, acknowledge the hypocrisy of the corporate media. Where's the outrage? Where's the fear mongering? Where's the pearl clutching? Now, here's the International Atomic Energy Agency that says they have been informed by Iran that a projectile struck close to these locations. This is their nuclear power plants. The 4th such incident in recent weeks. Iran has informed them that one of the site's physical protection staff members were killed by projectile fragments. Not a military target. Anyway, the point is that they expressed deep concern about the reports. Very milquetoast, if you want my opinion. Of course, if it was in another location, I bet you they'd be screaming bloody murder about why it's going to kill us all. But of course, it's like, we're uncomfortable and it should show restraint. I call restraint on both sides, kind of a thing you get from the UN. But I'm glad they're pointing it out. As this person says, your concern is concerning, but not enough. You should be blitzing the media talking about this because people are, they're trying to cause a nuclear disaster. Furkan points out, terrifying escalation. A top Russian official confirms a deadly strike just breached that nuclear power plant. That the same one that Russia is claiming, or an official. He warns a catastrophic nuclear incident risk is skyrocketing as mass evacuations begin. Now, that's yesterday. I'm not hearing as much today, so maybe he's hyping it. Maybe he thought it was worry. Maybe we'll see tomorrow. But the simple fact that they're bombing it is insane. Like 4 times. Like, it seems like a clear effort to make a problem, cause a fallout. And Chris Martinson says a nuclear incident is underway. Russia's state nuclear company evacuates. Didn't have to be this way. Sarah points out that the Israeli government has killed 3 UN peacekeepers in Lebanon. Nothing new. They seem to do this all the time. But the problem is that no one seems to care. They're wearing blue helmets, UN uniforms, and they are peacekeepers. And apparently they were from multiple places all around the world. And yet there's not some kind of global pushback about how Israel just murders these people for no. This happens constantly. I can think of like 5 different examples just through the October 7th forward point. I pointed out right in the beginning, a Reuters journalist got bombed in Lebanon, and Reuters barely criticized that. Israel bombs them anyway. Now, on top of that, turns out they killed them, but first they took care of the cameras. Seems consistent.
So UN peacekeepers have been stationed down there on that borderline for decades, in fact. But in the last month, there have been a number of deaths, as you mentioned, and also a number of serious injuries to these UN peacekeepers. They come from different countries all over the world. The 3 who died are Indonesian, but there were also a number of Ghanaian peacekeepers who were injured when an Israeli tank shell landed on their position a couple of weeks ago. Now, UNIFIL investigated that. They found that, yes, it was, in fact, the Israelis who then apologized and said, yes, okay, we did fire those tank shells at your position, but it was a mistake. We thought it was Hezbollah fire coming from your direction. But what has happened in the last 24 hours is that the UNIFIL base,
Wait a minute. I thought the UN was Hamas, right? So did Israel just apologize for bombing Hamas? Obviously not. That's how dumb this gets, right? So we should engage with like that. If we're going to take them seriously and they're screaming, the UN is Hamas, then why would we not take them seriously? Why wouldn't we then carry that forward and go, okay, well, you're bombing Hamas now, right? But then why'd you apologize? But that's not what they mean. They're being hyperbolic because the UN is not Hamas. But we let those things fly. People do. Major influential people at the highest levels of the media just let that fly because it's a ridiculous situation. They're not serious people. But just recognize that I argue this was not by accident. They've done it many times. It's about keeping people it's about controlling the situation and getting the international presence out of the area because they're going to be killing people and committing genocide and occupying territory like every other location they're involved in.
Headquarters down in Naura, which is a town right down by the Mediterranean Sea that the Israelis have been operating in and around for well over a week now. They've been moving their tanks around in there, detonating buildings and civilian homes. Today, they have destroyed all of the CCTV cameras around the UNIFIL base. Now, UNIFIL in a statement said that those cameras, they're not using them to spy on Israeli troops. In fact, they only look over the immediate perimeter of the base to ensure the safety of the military and civilian peacekeepers who live and work in there. They've launched a formal objection with the Israelis and reminded them of their their responsibility to ensure the safety of the peacekeepers. But what this does is it makes...
I mean, come on. This is just so blatantly obvious. Yeah, we just got rid of all the cameras as we're bombing them and have continued to bomb UN installations in Gaza and everywhere else in Lebanon forever. These are monsters we're talking about, guys. And then they just hide behind this illusion of morality. Sort of like Hegseth and Trump going, God bless us and in God's name, as they murder innocent people. That should bother you more than anything if that's what you care about. Reza Nasri points out, if anything, the war, first again, Trump, Bridge Day, Power Plant Day. He says, if anything, the war of aggression against Iran, along with Trump's erratic behavior, has shattered the illusion that a competent establishment exists in the United States. A network of experts and wiser heads embedded deep within the intelligence services, the military, the various agencies, supposedly capable of preventing apocalyptic decisions with devastating consequences for the world. He says there is no such thing. There are no real checks and balances. No mechanism exists to stop clearly unstable presidents from single-handedly pushing the world toward destruction. It's a deeply flawed political system that only functions well in Hollywood movies where extraterrestrial aliens attack. Now, what's interesting, though, is we should also stand back and ask, maybe this was part of at least one of the many possible directions to justify the new system. I know this sometimes frustrates people because we're, if you can, let's put it this way. It's important. It behooves you to stand back and consider all possibilities. That shouldn't be confusing to, we can talk this entire time about whether this is about this one thing. We should also be able to stand back and then go, but maybe even simultaneously, but let's just talk about the other thing. Maybe all of this was the design of collapsing this situation to justify the new technocratic governance or whatever, while he's building out the Board of Peace and all these. Or maybe both, but just consider that, because I think it's really important to see how these multiple, it could be very well that they're involved with this one location and there's something else above them that's dictating the secondary agenda. You just got to be open-minded to these things. But one of the larger points is about collapsing the things where right now, like take a small example, the USAID or the Fed or IRS. They know we've all been calling certain things out about them. So Trump came in and goes, remove those things. Didn't do that. In fact, the ones even they pretended to remove, they were replaced with something worse, because that's the whole plan. They know we're tired. They know we're done with the system. So they're not trying to justify the new switch. But back to the focal point, just considering that this might be all part of that, because that's what this feels like. Because I agree with them. The system is ridiculous. It's been broken for a long time. And and Trump seems to be doing it in a way that is so bombastically obvious that it's hard to miss. Kind of hard to not consider that. But either way, whether by design or not, he's right. What they've done has completely destroyed any illusion of morality or what they've always framed themselves as. The moral guidance of the world. It's gross to think about. Now, on the idea of the downplane and the deployment of troops, as I said, on the 3rd, Iran refuses to deal with the U.S. government, still true to this day, troops deployed in Iran. I even thought about it when I wrote it. I'm like, well, is that going to mislead people? And I said, no, it's because I'm like being too objective because they'll push back, but it's the truth. Even if it was, because I knew, as I read, they deployed special operations to try to search for them and rescue them. So I was like, in what world can they do that without having somebody on the ground? And so I said, well, there you go. An official statement of the actual troops being used within Iran. That's news if there's ever news in this conversation. Yet it gets weird pushback. So we now have the story coming out. Oh, first. And I forgot to play the other clip, actually. Here, let me play this really quickly, because that was the one that goes off of the first conversation about Netanyahu standing back and saying, it's just John Kirikou repeating it, but the point is, Netanyahu said, in case you missed the beginning, it's America's war. It's not our war.
Netanyahu said something that was very, very much overlooked and I think very disturbing last week.
And just ignore Megyn Kelly if you can.
He had given a speech, and an Israeli reporter asked him a question about the American-Israeli war against Iran. And he corrected her, and he said, it's the American war against Iran. We are America's.
Interesting. So, Disclose says Pete Hegseth fires 2 more generals, David Hondy and William Green Jr. That was why the full number was 15, or is it whatever the full number was? And one of the conversations, as we showed you earlier, was that people were uncomfortable with where this was going. And as Ken O'Keefe, a veteran himself, says, if you don't want to send 50,000 soldiers on a suicide mission, they'll just fire you. Right? I mean, so what we're talking about is troops on the ground, guys, which is what we were told just happened. Now, what were we hearing yesterday? That there was clashes. Or no, the third. There was literal massive clashes on the ground, and they were up there going, "You're fake news and you're lying," and whether they're covering an operation or not, guys, you're talking about Americans getting killed for something that's illegal, and then they just lie about it on top of everything else. So first, New York Times, downed U.S. Air Force officer rescued deep inside of Iran. That was yesterday. So first there was the ship that they lied about the planes being shot down, which was just this embarrassing display. All day, Hegseth is doing dancing around this, and they later admit it. Just really stupid. And they shot them down. That was they I guess they don't want to be seen as any kind of a weakness or failure, even though it's warfare. It's just weird. Then they claim they rescued somebody, and I say claim because none of this can truly be verified. Not in the sense of how that there was a ship and there was a person. It seems like the only things we can prove, or rather a plane, excuse me. But then they had somebody else that was there. They were over this last time frame, over the 3rd to today, they were trying to rescue, we're told, right? And so my point, that's going back to why I reported, well, that means they have people in Iran. That's obvious. So President Trump confirmed in a social media post just after midnight that the stranded officer had been brought out of Iran safely by U.S. forces. He added there were no U.S. casualties, which seemed to suggest, I don't even know why you take it at face value. They lie about it every time, but it would seem to suggest that maybe there's other casualties on the other side. But it says the rescue followed a life or death race between U.S. and Iranian forces, according to the New York Times, that stretched over 2 days to reach the injured airmen. So 2 days. That means there's people on the ground for 2 days, which again, I already think was there. And we already know they armed the Kurds. We already know they armed the protesters. So this is just a kind of a mixed bag. But it says the injured airman, who is a weapons systems officer, current and former U.S. officials said, in the end, Navy SEAL Team 6 commandos extracted the officer in a massive operation that involved, according to them, and this could be lied about, hundreds of special operations troops and other military personnel. So just hundreds of special operations troops, which apparently in the terminology of the military somehow never means boots on the ground, which is just a dumb sidestep. Because it's totally boots on the ground. It is a total deployment, regardless of what they mean in a military framework. And other military personnel, who knows, thousands more for all we know. I doubt it. But the point was clearly, as I was even laughing about when I asked Grok, I said, well, there are troops on the ground? No troops on the ground. I said, well, you just told me. It was this kind of effort to hide behind the words and not say it, even though they're saying it. It's frustrating. But is the deployment. So for those out there that were screaming, no more wars and peace president, and, oh, well, at least no Iran. Well, now there's Iran, but at least no troops on the ground. Well, now we have troops on the ground. Just one after another. As Tiberius writes, Iran is escalating the war by shooting down the planes bombing it. New York Times. He says, this is the worst controlled media than anything I've ever seen from China, Russia, North Korea, Iran. Literally arguing that by shooting down a plane trying to bomb their country during an illegal war, that they're escalating. Sort of like Netanyahu saying, if you keep bombing back, we're going to destroy your civilian infrastructure. It's just insane where we are. I don't even know how you can hide from this anymore. And back to these clips. This is on the 3rd. So think about this could be incorrect reporting, but we now have been verified from them that they had hundreds of troops on the ground. And here's what was being reported by Al Jazeera. So also think at the moment next time, don't blindly trust Al Jazeera or anybody, but recognize that in this moment, they were giving you the truth when the Western sources and new media were all lying to you or being lied to.
Well, the state TV has said that Iran has downed an American fighter jet. They say it's F-35. Now, we cannot confirm that from our side. And that 2 U.S. pilots are missing inside Iranian territories. This took place towards the west of the country in the...
At this moment, I believe Hegseth and the rest were denying this. I don't think I remember seeing their first engagement, but they were very clearly denying or at least sidestepping that these planes were shot down, even to the point to where it was like, you know, some kind of secondary explosion or whatever they were saying. Like, they're just so desperate to not admit those things, which screams weakness. But remember that whether it's about them being down or whether or not they were actually engaged with troops in the ground, just they were telling you this, well, other platforms were lying to you.
The areas of Luristan, between the areas of Luristan. And now we're hearing that, according to information that's circulating here on Iranian media, that the U.S. is conducting search operations for pilots who fell in 2 areas, Kaghalu and War Ahmed, as well as in Bushehr. Airdrop operations have been carried out and intense clashes. So what the Iranians are saying is that there are intense clashes between these forces and Iranian ground forces.
So right there, if they're telling us they have hundreds of people, and Iran is saying there was heavy clashes between these forces, and yet they come back and tell us that nobody died. Does anybody believe that? Think of how little respect they have for these people risking their lives for their agenda, which I guarantee you they lied about to these people.
The Revolutionary Guards in the Dailam region, resulting in casualties among the invading forces. This is based on what the Iranians are saying.
And here's just another follow-up post. This one's from the next day. This one is from the 4th. Increasing numbers of reports indicate, now this looks like a video from the night before, so it's pretty much the same time frame. Increasing numbers of reports indicate that clashes are happening between U.S. and Iranian forces in the area where the U.S. pilots are suspected to be. Thousands of people, citizens, tribesmen are heading towards the areas of the clashes between U.S. forces and Mujahideen on the ground. Asal Rod, and this just kills me, guys. So in regard to the conversation of the pilot, so this on the 4th when this is ongoing, this is how they reported this. I'll let you hear it first.
It's big news, isn't it? And I just keep bringing our viewers up to date. You know, why are we concentrating on one jet and one aircrew? Well, it's because tactically it's not really significant, but strategically, if Iran manages to find the aircrew first, then the danger is we go down a path which we went down in the Gulf War when Flight Lieutenant John Peters, how we had him on earlier, you know, he was paraded propaganda, and it touched the whole world, and it suddenly brings a human dimension to the war. So at the moment,
suddenly brings a human dimension to a war that's already killed millions of people, or, you know, well, to be real, but well, depending on what you're talking about, the whole dynamic or just maybe Gaza. But seriously, all the people that have been killed, but now suddenly the missing person brings a human dimension. The sociopathic mindset of these people, like these other lives don't matter. You realize other Americans have been killed already, right? It's just speechless. I mean, it's just, I don't understand how they cannot recognize, as from like a media perspective, it's just tone deaf, I guess. Like you don't even see it anymore. It's mind blowing. And of course, what he's saying, by the way, is, you know, in the Gulf or whatever else, well, what you're talking about here is these are illegal invasive actions or invading. You're talking about actions that are breaking the law, and then that person is potentially hurt. You know, I don't want anybody to be hurt, American, Iranian, anybody. But if you're going to be objective about it, realize that they broke the law by going in there. They're also in the middle of a war, whether they did or not. So them being killed would be what they would tell us as part of war. But then to turn it around to be like, they're going to hurt the guy and they're monsters. It's just, you're trying to like spin this into some human issue that you put him in. And in fact, most cases turn around, it's not even really what they're going to do. Look at what Israel's doing and look at what they claim the other side was doing. You know that we can prove all this now. We can still look back and realize they lied about almost everything they claimed Hamas was doing. And in almost every case, they did it themselves. It's the same thing as the U.S. does. Now, bombing an elementary school that kills 150 little girls. Collateral damage, right? Missing pilot from fighter jet. Human dimension. It really, and she's right, it dehumanizes the region. Now, here's what Trump said is the Easter miracle, which a lot of people argue might not have gone the way he argued. And we'll get into that next.
Big news overnight. In an extraordinary turn of events, the United States has rescued the second crew member who was in the U.S. F-15 fighter jet shot down over Iran Friday. President Trump texting me directly this morning, the rescue was an Easter miracle.
Right. So texting me directly, the man who's lied about every single thing we've been hearing about this war. Go ahead, Trump. Let us know what's really going on. Why would you, in any context, whether he's been truthful anyway, he's a politician. So you're the adversarial media? No, you guys are blind you are stenographers for the power. Now, look, reporting that Trump's put the statement out is one thing, but when you look at the way they all cover this, it's like a success story. We did it and we're back and we're Americans and we're free. This is jingoistic propaganda. And honestly, some people are arguing that he might not even make it, or that he might not have made it, or might not make it, or that they were horrible casualties that they're covering up by acting like this was a success. I'll show you some of the imagery in a second. But just realize how insane it is for a journalist, if like we can call them that, to say that, just like report this story as fact because Trump said it. Well, if you were going to be an honest reporter, you would include as a, asterisk, he's also lied about a lot of these things and we can prove that. So bear that in mind. Not what you get.
The enemy was large and violent. The rescuers were brilliant, strong, decisive, and as cool as anyone can be.
Are you serious? Were you there? Cruel as anybody can be? Like, this is so embarrassing. This is not some novel. This is what makes you go, this probably didn't even happen.
The Iranians thought they had him, but it wasn't even close. And remember, we got two, but couldn't talk about the first, and that it would have highlighted that there was a second.
See that? So now he's trying to make it look like that's why we had to lie to you all. If they had died, they would have denied it forever. And you damn well know it.
Such a rescue has never happened before in so violent an enemy territory.
Except it literally has. A couple times, but Trump's the best ever.
It is usually not done because it is considered not doable. Such a great military like no other.
Best
adding on
of all time, best thing, just like this on top of the best operation of any operation we've ever operated in. It's like it's stupid. It's actually cringy bad. I don't know why people don't make fun of him all the time. Now, some people do, but I'm talking about like the entire conversation, not just the blind follow, but like you're conservative out there. And you're not blindly following anybody, but you have conservative values. This should be the people you call out more than anybody.
Social, open the effing strait, you crazy bastards, or you'll be living in hell.
Okay. So let's just go ahead and take that with a pound of salt and ask ourselves whether, maybe the operation went down the way the military says, but he adds all these weird little adjectives and, crueler than any cruel has ever been cruel, whatever he says. So Dr. Sam Youssef points out the Pentagon is hiding the truth about the failed operation last night. American camouflage for the landing operation at a remote airport in Isfahan was actually aimed at a major military landing operation. The American Isfahan operation was an initial landing operation for stabilizing entry routes and securing it for large ground landing operation. And when it failed, the Pentagon diverted the compass with the excuse of rescuing the pilot to justify their failure. His opinion, interesting though, you don't rescue one pilot with a huge C-130. A lot of people pointed that out. It was another major disaster and a failure that they lied about. So you could even argue what they're saying is they made up the whole story to justify a failure. But there's a lot of this going around, guys, about the many different things. This is one of them, showing you this is supposedly the locations that they succeeded in. Here is Goluboff showing you that same image, saying if the United States gets 3 more victories like this, it'll be utterly ruined. You have friends like it. Who needs enemies when you got friends like Israel? Same kind of point, right? So it belies the reality. It suggests that something else happened than them having some secret fly in, fly out, save operation. Because they're not even claiming that there was clashes, you understand? Here is Cosmo Trade saying Fox News reporting something that seems to contradict what Trump is saying.
We don't know the condition of the airmen at this point. I can tell you that the injuries are likely to be serious. We know that the pilot still remains in the region getting treatment. That suggests to me that the medical condition of the pilot is such that he cannot travel onto landstuhl yet. Must be stabilized before you can do that. So this is still a very serious situation. A number of U.S. service members were injured during the rescue mission. We knew on Friday that
That's not what we're being told.
2 of the military helicopters were struck by
This is the chief national security correspondent.
enemy fire as part of that rescue mission. And then we know more details about the A-10 Warthog that crashed on Friday. That A-10 Warthog was providing suppressive fire and flying cover for the rescue operation.
So think about that. So we're still claiming no one got killed, and you literally lost another plane in the defense of the operation to save the first guy. I mean, they're drowning in this. Does anybody even think it's possible that nobody got killed in all that?
As they were trying to find this, they were in a race against the clock to find this second airman who had ejected from the plane and was hiding in that ridge line. But we know that A-10 Warthog crashed in Kuwait, and the pilot of that plane also had to eject and be rescued. But he is safe as well, I'm told. And good news tonight. But I think when all is said and done and we learn the details of this rescue mission, it really will be the stuff of Hollywood.
Of course, because it is Hollywood. But the point, though, is that that could be a lie, too. The whole thing could be manufactured, right? Or what they're feeding her. Because you have to, this is what's so incredible, guys. We know that's what's going on. These people are lying about everything. They're literally coming out and getting caught lying about every part of the story. And yet the new day comes around and we all just take at face value what they tell you is going on. That seems a little bit stupid and naive, doesn't it? And it's obvious that they're trying to deceive you where they need to. So everything they say should be taken with a little bit of grain of salt, right? But here's Laura Loomer coming out and saying, Israel's our greatest ally. Thank you, Israel, for helping rescue our pilot. Oh, it's interesting. That's not what we heard over there. That's not what we heard from Trump. So now I'm starting to wonder if there's a whole other layer to the story about who's actually causing the deaths and destruction here. Israeli officials reportedly shared information with the U.S. as the search and rescue operation unfolded. I don't know, man. I mean, it's hard to know. None of this could be real because of how obviously they're lying to us. So that's just my point is that it ends up in this, you put it aside. But we could talk about it, we discussed it, but at the end of the day, all of this is suspect. The fact that Loomer jumps in and goes, Israel's responsible. It just feels wrong, guys, the whole thing. And as this goes forward, I bet you some of these will become a little bit more full. Like they'll come into view a little bit more. And you know what I mean about this? We do this all the time. Over the year, a month later, something else pops up where you go, oh, that's right. That thing she said, or what, and it all of a sudden comes back around. And with how much they're lying, it seems to happen more often. Greg Abbott says, this is so awesome, and puts out this post, or tags the post from somebody showing allegedly the person that was saved. And says, here's the photo of the honorable colonel being rescued yesterday. God bless him. Our soldiers are all doing God's work. Happy Easter. But it says this image is not real, but AI generated. No credible records exist for the image, which depicts telltale AI signs. Well, look at that. So what's going on? It really makes you wonder with what's all, it's everywhere you look, guys. Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, shared this. But look for yourself. You're going to find this all over the place being shared by major people. We're being gaslit. So that makes you wonder whether this even happened. Daniel Lambert on BBC News. Now, the top 3 stories on the 4th, all about a single U.S. pilot who was illegally bombing Iran. They didn't give a fraction of this coverage to 185 kids murdered by the United States. This isn't news. It's a blatant and sickening propaganda for war in USA. Now, this is BBC. USA, same thing, guys. Anywhere else, same thing. James Woods, because he's just super smart, he comes out and says, the auto pen fool left astronauts to die in the outer space. The auto pen fool left astronauts to die in outer space. President Trump sent an army to rescue one wounded American. It's weird what you think you're doing right here. First of all, because you're not, the reality is, Biden and Trump, same thing. You're a child, right? Or you're just don't care and you're being dishonest. The idea that you somehow go, Trump's my guy, Biden's the bad one. You're an infant playing you're a girl throwing his panties at an Elvis concert. It's embarrassing, especially since Trump is a complete clown, lies all the time, and Biden can't tie his own shoes. But you pick which one you like better. At the end of the day, President Trump sent an army to rescue. Why is it a good thing? You send an army illegally into a country to rescue a guy that you put in there illegally that was carrying out illegal actions. This guy is a blind partisan supporter. Frankly, don't even think he knows what's going on. He just thinks he does. But as I said, how's that auto pen investigation going, by the way, James? The auto pen fool. Oh, you mean the thing that Trump has told you is not important anymore? But you made a big deal, right? All in capital? Like what? Are you guys like, okay, what about Obama? When's he going to be to jail? Or Pelosi? How about that? How about all the fraud that you keep screaming about, James Woods? What about that? Let me know when there's actual follow through, as opposed to, I don't know, you flailing. And by the way, I agree they should be in jail. Maybe you don't. Maybe we should think about that. Maybe all of these guys screaming about how it's all coming down actually don't want them to go to jail. Or maybe they just don't care. I do think Obama should be in jail. I do want to see him being held accountable. Apparently he doesn't if he's screaming about an auto pen. Or excuse me, I meant Biden, by the way. It's the same. I said Obama because we're talking up here. But Biden too. I think Biden should be in jail. He's a war criminal. These people don't care. Otherwise, they would call out the fact that they're not doing anything about it. Dylan Allman points to what Caroline Leavitt said. This is in response to the action, the rescuing on the 4th. She says, "We got him. My fellow Americans, over the past several hours, the United States military pulled off one of the most daring search and rescue operations in history." Maybe. You know what I mean? Like genuinely, like whether it even happened, maybe that was daring. Maybe you didn't do anything at all. Maybe you were complete. Maybe you guys failed spectacularly, because we know you say this regardless, Caroline Leavitt. But either way, if it was, let's say it went spectacularly, was it truly the most daring in history? Well, since he says that about everything he does, we should ask how bad this gets. He's the boy who cries wolf in every dynamic. But it continues saying, well, the point was just it's so great and we did great and everyone won and we're the best thing ever. Happy Easter to everybody. Okay. So Dylan says this is blood-polished propaganda for an occupation that never should have existed in the first place. I do not care how many flags are draped over it, how many capital letters are screamed into the void, or how theatrically the rescue is narrated. Those soldiers should not have been there. Their lives were placed in danger by the same state, now demanding applause for retrieving them from the danger that it engineered, that it put them in. Then, with the usual vulgar reflex, the whole thing is repackaged as patriotic liturgy designed to convert fear, relief, and sentiment into fresh consent for the next escalation. Well put. I'm willing to bet you Caroline Leavitt can't even read half those words, so that's where we are. U.S. continues strikes on Iran after successful rescue of the F-15E aircrew. Weird, though, as somebody pointed out to me, that they don't mention their names. Isn't that strange? April 4th, successful completed rescue. Okay. Service members were safely. Oh, but the most important part, U.S. strikes into Iran continue. What do you mean continue? Is it not April 5th? Sunday? Didn't Trump just tell us we were waiting until Tuesday or Monday or whatever post you decide to look at? Oh, but like I've been telling you, if you pay attention, they've been bombing the whole time. Because the U.S. has been working alongside Israel to continue to bomb Lebanon and Iran. Because apparently Israel can control the U.S. military, whether Trump's involved or not. Weird, right? Am I crazy, guys? I mean, this is not a joke. This is posted by U.S. Central Command. They're telling you, we've continued to bomb Iran. Right in this moment, on the 5th, today, we were just told that we were waiting until tomorrow or Tuesday or whatever. There needs to be a word made for this. It's not crazy, cartoonish. It's something special. Like, it's just like, I think really, like I've said 1,000 times, is they're at a point where you're not just going to go, fine, we're lying, you got us. That's never going to happen. But so you get to a point where it becomes so ridiculous because we all know it. There's no answer they can give you. They just have to make up a new lie and we all go, whatever, that's ridiculous. And it just gets more and more compounded. You know what I mean? And so the point is, you're like, whatever reason they put this out, maybe they're telling the truth, maybe they want you to see it, but the lies are everywhere to where this just becomes obvious. These people should be in front of the Hague right now. This point again, Israel is telling the world it's America's war. I really want that to register with the honest conservatives who are on the fence about this and recognize what we're talking about. And then recognize that Trump will continue to put your lives at risk for Israel as they stand back and say, it's all your fault. You can do it. It's not ours. It's on you. As they then keep using U.S. people to carry out their war and keep standing there on the microphone and going, Iran's bad. Take on Iran. But it's your war. It's what they do.
Netanyahu said something that was very much overlooked and I think very disturbing last week. He had given a speech, and an Israeli reporter asked him a question about the American-Israeli war against Iran. And he corrected her, and he said, it's the American war against Iran. We are America's ally.
Oh, boy.
And I thought, oh, buddy, that's not what you were saying 2 weeks ago. Now we stand alone doing your dirty work.
Shut up, Megan.
But that's what it's come down to.
Megan, just sit down for a minute. Oh, you're sitting down. You know, like, I'm just so tired. Her and Alex and all the rest of them, guys. You guys literally dragged people into this, and now you act like you're just so outraged. And I guarantee, because they've done it many times, that they fall right back into line the easiest moment that presents itself. I'm tired. I'm tired of she's literally the one that said that Palestinians would rather have their children starve to death than help out a Jewish person. That's how gross this person is. Whether she believes it or not, you're a lost person. I mean, it's just that is something that needs to be expressed. Now, I shouldn't say it like that, because I'd like to believe anybody can find their way back if they want to. But I mean, imagine if you flipped it around and simply said that a Jewish person would rather have a Palestinian or have their family starve to death than help a Palestinian. You would be racist, anti-Semitic, and you'd lose your job, and everyone, it's the same exact sentiment. But here she is shaking her head because, I mean, do you realize how very clearly she supports this agenda with Israel and Trump, the whole damn thing, but now she's all uncomfortable about it? I mean, even the point with Iran, she came out pretty early kind of going like, this is not the right path, but there's been many examples where she's towed the line for Trump's agenda. Anyway, the point is, John Kirikow telling you that Israel has thrown you under the bus, America. As we told you, as we showed you the meme, the classic of Israelis sitting on the beach, Americans in coffins with flags over them. And we told you this is where it's going to go, not because we're psychic or we've seen them do it before. No, just remember that as we go into the next agenda, the next topic, and the next year, and the next administration, and continue to recognize the people who are out here telling you the same truths. I shouldn't say it like that, but the truth. They were telling you the reality of what's going on, and that are consistent with the principles and logic and everything. To finish, as we discussed with Gaza, and as we know they're doing everywhere else, Israel and the United States involved in this agenda, it's important to come all the way back around. Take a look at this. I mean, that's a crane right there. There's two cranes. Those are not small things, guys. This is a massive picture of what used to be Gaza. It's flat. What, 2.5 million people live there? Half children? Who knows now? This is what Israelis meant when they very publicly said, not a stone upon a stone. It's a prophecy referring to what they wanted to do to Gaza. Called them Amalek. Destroy everything, which was being stated from the very beginning. Only liars and morons are still pretending this was not the most obvious and well-documented genocide in history. I don't know how you can miss that. And as Saul Rod points out, another picture, similar point, where Haaretz, an Iranian missile, hit my home while my kids were alone. It's insane. Well, as the other person pointed out, well, you started the war and you're bombing everybody right now and killing people in Tehran and everywhere else. But this is the real point. Well, these were homes. These had families in them. Each one of these had hopes and dreams and college aspirations. I mean, these were families. And now they're rubble on the ground. And you laughed about it. Right? So, and I'm not talking about these individual people. I'm talking about the Israeli government. So the fact that these people are suffering is because of the Israeli government. Now, who knows whether they support it or not? And if they supported it, they've laughed, they sat there on that cliff and ate popcorn while they died. Well, then they are reaping what they sowed. But if not, and they are in the middle somewhere or stood up and said that they don't support what Israel's doing. The point is, Israel has still put them in the middle of this. They are the ones suffering because of Israel's illegal agenda. If you're an Israeli or anybody else out there, stand up and call it out because they don't care about you. Just like the IDF will beat up Orthodox Jews in the street because they stand up against Zionism, they'll beat up anybody. They will kill anybody. They will torture anybody if you get in their way. And I'd love for that to be hyperbolic. It's just not. History will show you that. These were homes too. Doctors Without Borders. Not 2025, 2024, April 3rd, 2026. We haven't been able to bring any supplies into Gaza, Palestine, since the 1st of January because Israel authorities are blocking aid. Yeah, that didn't change. People just moved on. Read from our medical advisor in Gaza about how this is affecting operations in our hospitals. Saul Rod points out, Doctors Without Borders. There's a critical shortage of medical supplies in Gaza because Israel is blocking aid. Media, crickets. Nothing. They're dying every day. Didn't change. I mean, the obvious reality here, guys, is this is something everybody knows about. Just doesn't stop. Ahmed Safa, who recently resigned from the UN because he's calling all this out and refuses to be silent. When I was 6 years old, he writes, Israel dropped bombs disguised as toys, just like they did in Gaza or pretty much everywhere else. The intent behind these devices, again, really not being hyperbolic about this. This is a practice that they do. In Gaza, they were little cans that looked like food and as well as little things that looked like toys. It was very well documented. That's aimed at children. The intent behind the devices was to lure children into handling them, leading to fatal outcomes. But keep talking about how Israel's not targeting children. In fact, how did I not include that? Dang it. It's a horrible story. But there was one, I guess I'll just get into it the next show. I don't want to try to find it. But another story showing you that there was a more like autopsies reports coming from all the different children that were shot. And you've heard this actually because it's been reported pretty widely by numerous doctors there, but that they aimed for the head and the genitals. And it showed you that like 70% of the shots in children they found were in those two locations. That's who we're dealing with, guys. And you know this stuff. Israeli settlers killed a Palestinian farmer on his own land in front of his father. Yes, again, writes the headline for the leading Israeli newspaper, Haaretz. April 3rd, 2026. Just another day in occupied West Bank that Trump supports. Killed him in front of his father. Yep, again, just another day. Lebanon. As Mohammed points out, no one talks about this in the corporate media anyway. This is what Israel's doing to its neighbors. Destroying entire villages. It's not Gaza, it's Lebanon. Look at that. That's one explosion. That's an entire neighborhood. They're just ethnically cleansing everybody. Millions of Christians are being displaced. Christians in Lebanon are speaking out about how they're being killed by, it's everywhere you look. They're telling Muslims that they're telling the Christians in Lebanon that they're not allowed to help the Muslims who are fleeing from their bombs. And they're also persecuting the Christians who are choosing to speak out about it because they don't care about any of it. Genuinely unbelievable, she writes, that Israel can ethnically cleanse over 1 million people and still keep its name out of the headlines. As AP writes, Lebanon's displaced Shiites face rising hostility as airstrikes fuel fear of evictions. Must be just falling from the sky. Must be magic, right? Yes, who knows who's involved because they don't write Israel. This clip is upsetting. Now, I'm actually going to play a little bit of it. It went long, so I'm going to wrap, but I'll try to play this next one, actually. But Alex Crawford shared this. We've been in Marjioun, the mainly Christian town of South Lebanon, which has been told by Israeli military not to give sanctuary to their Muslim neighbors, fleeing the surrounding villages, being bombed by Israeli jets. Human rights groups call it ethnic cleansing. Israel claims it's getting rid of Hezbollah militants, endangering citizens across the border. Here's what they had to say about that. So I'm going to play a little bit of this. We'll see. Maybe it all. We'll see. And then I'm going to play with one clip to end, but I'll leave it there today. Thank you for tuning in, guys. Hope you had a nice day with your family, whatever your religion, wherever you are in the world. And I think that, times like this from the Easter holiday in the United States and wherever else is being practiced, that it's important that we reflect on what the real meaning of these are, not the Hollywood or whatever you would call it, the, corporatized version, but the idea, like what even like the bastardized version of Christmas has become, gifts and whatever else. But it is still within this idea of this good-natured element, right? Of being your best self, of caring about other people. It's always there because I believe this is what we truly are as a culture, as a species. Like at the end of the day, as I've always said, as I think Caitlin Johnstone said, that they wouldn't pretend to be good and fighting for freedom if we didn't want that. Right? I mean, what if we all wanted bad things, why wouldn't they just be? I mean, you could argue that's where Trump's going with it. But up until now, it's clear that I think people, and I think even with Trump, you can see that his supporters don't want this. People want good. They're just not good. And what they've realized, if they can pretend they are, that many of us will put our head in the sand and let them do their evil things. You just got to care. People matter. Lives matter. Your dreams matter. Your neighbor. I mean, everybody. You can see that people have. There's everybody, whether you're in Iran or Saudi Arabia or in the furthest corner, wherever you think you're talking about, they have ambitions for their life and dreams and hopes for their family and want their children to grow up and want, and yet we act like these people are just somehow the other. They just hate you for your freedom or whatever disgustingly stupid thing we've bought. And whether that's even true or not, well, guess what? They have a right to do and hate and feel what they want, like anyone else in the world. And they also have a justification because your government's been killing them our entire lives. But we can change these things. I think we are changing these things. So thank you for tuning in. I have 2 interviews tomorrow, possibly both coming out tomorrow. I mean, and shoot, if I have the opening and the time, I'll try to get a show out, but it's probably unlikely for tomorrow. And then I'll be doing one the next day after that. And I believe we have, as I said, the Bibhu Dev Misra interview discussing the Yuga cycle conversation. Again, a follow-up, because he's got some interesting insights into where he thinks we are right now. So I figured it'd be fun to follow up with him and get into that side of it, more of the esoteric. But appreciate your support. We literally couldn't do this without you. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
The road into Marjayoun is difficult and dangerous. All around here is fighting. There are constant Israeli airstrikes and Hezbollah shelling, trying to stop the troops advancing into South Lebanon, but also hitting villages in northern Israel.
Lots of hits along the road on the way in.
The town's water supplies have already been bombed. We see the evidence as we enter. We've negotiated special passage here with the town's officials and the Lebanese army, who are still very present in the town. Marjayoun's geography makes it a key position which Israel is keen to control on its eastern front. The town sits on a hill overlooking the Litani River Valley, and Israel wants the river as its new border or buffer zone, taking an extra 10% of Lebanese territory. The backdrop of bombing is ever present.
The windows shook. Did it land?
You never get used to this, though.
You see? Siren. In Israel. The border coming south.
When were you in Gaza?
End of April for the first couple weeks. And then there's sniper bullets. I have children that were shot twice.
Wait, you're saying that children in Gaza are being shot by snipers?
Definitively. I have 2 children that I have photographs of that were shot so perfectly in the chest I couldn't put my stethoscope over their heart more accurately, and directly on the side of the head in the same child. No toddler gets shot twice by mistake by the world's best sniper. And they're dead center shots.
In fact, more than 20 doctors recently in Gaza also told Sunday Morning about gunshot wounds to children. One American doctor told us he even reviewed CT scans to confirm what he saw because he, quote, didn't believe that this many children could be admitted to a single hospital with gunshot wounds to the head. Some shootings have been captured on video. So, of all the disaster zones you've seen, how does Gaza compare?
all of the disasters I've seen combined, 40 mission trips, 30 years, ground zero, earthquakes, all of that combined doesn't equal the level of carnage that I saw against civilians in just my first week in Gaza.
And when you say civilians, is it mostly children?
Almost exclusively children. I've never seen that before. Never seen that. I've seen more incinerated children than I've ever seen in my entire life combined. I've seen more shredded children in just the first week.
Shredded?
Shredded.
What do you mean?
Missing body parts, being crushed by buildings, the greatest majority, or bomb explosions, the next greatest majority. We've taken shrapnel as big as my thumb out of 8-year-olds.
The UN reports that to date, more than 80% of Gaza's population has been displaced and the majority of its buildings destroyed. A reality which has taken its own toll on the well-being of children.
What about the emotional wounds?
How can you measure that? I can't measure my own. How do you be an orphan and watching your family, melted in front of you and shredded in front of you? How do you fix that? Ever fix that?
In fact, so many Palestinian children have had family members killed that doctors created a shorthand term, WCNSF, wounded child, no surviving family.